my alleged newspaper career actually covers from an entirely hand-set paper to the computerised thing. And the reason for that was that my father had a fellow apprentice back, turn of the century, Elgin Main. And Elgin started the Eyre Peninsula Tribune at Cowell.
At Cowell it was?
Cowell on Eyre Peninsula.
Yeah.
And it was still a hand-set paper.
Oh, let me, you pop it in your pocket and let me clip that onto your collar. You're going to be sitting that way, so let's pop it on there.
So when we took that paper over, it was still hand-set. So every article, the compositor stood in front of the, God, what's the rack called, Joan? The case, and took each letter individually and built the thing up.
So each little thing like this was actually a piece of lead, I've got one somewhere, with the letter G on it. And it'd all be set in like the old typewriter I've got. So it'd be like all type and all different sizes, different fonts. And there'd be this machine where he would have to make the headlines and then he'd type, gold member. And it would go click, 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 and it'd go down into this box. That's how they used to print in the old days. Astounding. You're just like, sounds weird. You don't even know what it is. I know.
One of the things about it was that it was also rudimentary and people just made it work because it was how you did it.
Yeah.
And when they sent me out to Sojourner, you're talking about not being able to see the photographs. I never got to see the photographs till they were in the newspaper because I used to put the undeveloped roll of film, having not seen a single shot, into an overnight bag and send it to Eyre, and they would print it out and put probably the first one onto the page because they didn't care. And I would see it when I opened up the paper. So I saw on one occasion a big black circle where there should have been a photograph of a lady because she was sitting on the end of the Streaky Bay jetty and you can't turn a jetty around. The sun was behind it, but I was going to shoot it with a flash, except because you have jack of all trades in the country, I'd been shooting football the day before. I'd forgotten to change it from 2000 to, a slower shutter speed. So the shutter was closed by the time the light bounced off the lady with a huge sun hat on. So when I opened the paper on page 3, there's nothing but a big black circle where this lady should have been.
And then when the page was there, then you would shoot, it'd go through, I don't know what they called it, but that you'd take another photograph of that, which would make a negative, like this, a massive large negative.
Of the whole page.
That would go onto the printing press, and then it would be printed from there.
Yes.
Then after the paper was printed, the paper had to be disced. That is, those letters had to be distributed back into...
Cleaned first.
Well, cleaned, then distributed.
How did you clean them? How did you clean them?
Oh, kerosene, bit of Kero and scrub it, wipe it, get the ink off, that's all.
And whose job was that?
And then...
Whose job was that, sorry?
The printer's devil.
The printer's devil?
Yep. So when Elgin had an apprentice.
Yes.
Greg Wiseman. And when the paper was out, the old bloke would head off to the pub and leave the printer's devil to disc the paper. And when we took over, we immediately, of course, turned it into typesetting, linotype. We did the setting in Lincoln for it. And when we moved some of this old machinery out, there were a lot of holes in the floor of this old building. And underneath each hole was a pyramid of type, up like that. And what would happen, when the old bloke went to the pub, the printer's devil would get a galley of type and just tip it down a hole in the floor rather than diss it. And you think they'd run out of type, but of course a lot of papers were then going off handset onto linotype, so you could buy type cheaply everywhere, as these papers got rid of it.
They're happy to just buy more.
I'm saying we owned a paper that for one issue, I think, was still handset before we converted to linotypes.
Really?
And then before we sold out, we had gone from letterpress to computer setting, offset, the whole deal.
And of course the paper obviously did very well.
Well, when I started, I mean, it hadn't changed since Bill Caxton's day. And when I left, we're in the 20th century.
This is the camera I used to use.
Oh.
Could I take a picture?
You can see how heavy it is.
Okay.
This is the old Hasselblads.
Oh,
So you gotta
the
hold it
flash that
underneath.
you, like take off and then go smile and then.
And then like when the kids would be like, take our photo, and you didn't have enough film to take their photo, you'd just like press the flash button and go flash.
I remember doing that.
Sadly, someone would come into the paper to order their picture that you didn't take.
That's right, because you just pressed the little button and just
All the
kept them
time.
happy,
What do you like?
got rid of
Take
them.
our photo, and you go, yeah, no worries, flash. Because days of film, you couldn't waste stuff. Remember, it was like
That's
3 or
right.
4 shots, that's it.
Yeah, and that was probably particularly expensive
Totally.
large format film that went with the... Oh, you've still got some of the film there.
I've got film, yeah. I reckon there's one in there loaded, so we
So
can
that camera there is called large format. Like the other ones, the normal cameras are
got some
35.
next. Oh, hang on.
Gee, I can't read.
And whereas this one here, you see, when you look through the lens, you see such a magnificent image, and it's really easy to see what you're doing. But taking sport was a nightmare. The only person who could do it was Volly, and he was half blind when I got there. Remember that? And
These
there
are the
you go.
negs.
These are the negs. These are large.
These were the
format.
sea lions, Point Labatt sea lions.
Yep.
So that's how
Mum,
big
what does this
So you can see what they mean by
You
large.
probably don't even
format.
know what a negative
Mum,
is,
what
do you?
does this do? Mum, what does this
Oh, that winds the film on, so you don't need that.
Wind
But
the
yeah,
film.
large format, so it was like the camera of its day, wasn't it?
Well, it was the high quality camera, and you can see how much. Well, actually, you don't even know what a 35mm negative looks like. It's a lot smaller, whereas this one's obviously large.
Do you know what a negative is? You've never seen you've never seen a negative. right.
Tell us how a negative works, Jodie.
Right, so the negative works by, it's got like, I don't know, I don't actually technically know, Derek, but the negative has, like it's sensitive to light, the strip. So you get a roll of film. Let me find some negatives here.
So it's a chemical process.
The light goes on it.
The chemical sensitive to light.
Yeah, sensitive to light. So what happens is when you press the trigger on the camera, there's like a, so this is a normal negative. So you'd get a roll of film. Right, which would be long, and you'd have to wind it onto the camera, of which I have a camera to wind it onto. I'll show you. This is very interesting photography. You'd probably have to cut all this out, Derek.
Yeah, but suddenly it's an interesting topic because it's obsolete.
Yeah, here we go, and I'll put one on for you.
Whereas this is as we're just saying, this is what you were taught at
Look
university.
at this beautiful camera. This is what I was taught at uni. I loved photography.
Yeah.
Mum, grab an orange juice, please.
Not right now. Here, we're doing this. Come back.
Grab a water.
I've got to remember how to do it. Probably can't even open the blooming thing now. There we go. All comes back to you. And there'd be something in here. Open sesame.
Replay.
Oh, stop doing that.
Why?
Because that's a very expensive, rare, irreplaceable
Camera.
Then, I told you.
Oh, this is all seized up. They're that old. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is your. This is
my
a
old
Nikon
Nikon.
FE2, which is also an X Times one, because I recognise it. I used to use it too.
What have I done there, Derek?
And this is I'd probably just leave it until it decides to. Don't force it. Oh, there you go. You've got
It's
it.
all right. Maybe I need to wind it. No, there's nothing in there. Oh, no, there is something in there. Oh, I've got to rewind it. Okay, that's rewound.
So this is what I didn't use one of these till I went to the Sentinel in 1991.
Really?
Yeah, I'd only ever used the Hasselblad before. And what I was going to say about taking sports photos is that it had a big telephoto lens on the front and a pistol grip, and that's a really heavy camera, as you get the idea. And so you've got that on a pistol, and then you've got this trigger on it on a rod about that long. You remember that? You had
Crazy, yeah.
to depress the shutter, and you imagine that the foot was happening in front of you, and it also had a lever on the side to focus it.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
So that was pulling it to the side so it's pulling you away from the shot, and you're doing this long trigger pull to take the shot on this incredibly heavy thing, and you couldn't do it except Volly. The telephoto lens had a lever on the side to zoom in and out, so it would pull you offline all the time.
Yeah.
And also there was that's right, and then it had a trigger there with a big long trigger on it like that, on a big rod. So to take the photo, you had to depress it about like 6 or 7 centimetres. And you imagine taking sport, by the time you got the photo taken, it's all over.
Yeah.
Finished, gone. But Volly could do it. He used to take cricket photos standing on the pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they called him the 12th man.
he'd take great shots, but whenever he had to have a ball in it, didn't he?
Yeah.
That he had to have a ball. And just let me move your water over there. And so he would cut them out, and he had all different size balls in different sort of positions, you see, that he'd cut out.
Different lights on them as well.
Different lights on, so he could, and they all looked dodgy as hell, but anyway, he had it done as well as he could, remembering that he couldn't see too well at this stage, take a beautiful photograph, and he'd stick them on the photograph and then reshoot it.
Often Wally's pictures of a sporting action, he'd love to get the footballers running towards you, and of course the ball's in front. So when you do the picture, the ball's a long way from the figures you want to blow up. So Wally used to cut the ball out and move it back in front of them and stick it on, and it was a more dramatic sports picture. Well, he did that one day, and what he didn't notice was he had a couple of spare balls that would look the right size for whatever picture he was fiddling with. And what he didn't notice was there was an existing genuine football in that picture. So he stuck his on and we printed it, and there's this thing with 2 footballs.
Did anyone?
Oh, everyone noticed it.
Everyone did. And mostly they were in
It was like a
roughly the right-
bromide, so he'd have the photograph and he'd cut it out and he'd stick it on they call it the slab, I think.
Yeah.
So the actual pages were all cut out, the type would come out, stick them through the waxer, they'd cut it out, stick them on the pages, and then he'd stick the photo on and be like, oh, there's no ball. So he'd go and he'd find his ball and he'd stick it on.
With wax, you're right.
With wax, he'd wax it on and he'd put it on there. So the guys would all be going up for a mark, there'd be no ball because it's not there yet or it had bounced under something. So he'd stick the ball on there in the picture.
Ah.
So, because it wasn't digital times, like he couldn't go, oh, what's my photo? Like the thing is, he'd have to go back to the Times office and develop it. Like now you're taking sports photos and you go, click, click, yep, got a ball, that's a great shot, next sport. Back then, he would just take photos and have no idea of whether he got the shot or not, but he was a great sports photographer.
Brilliant sports photographer.
He would always get that action shot, and like it was minimal, you had film, so you couldn't go and shoot 300 photos in one weekend. You had to like just, 4 shots per game or
That's
something.
right, because
just
film's
nail it.
really expensive.
And you'd have to know what to do.
And here we have a bit of classic Volly. Lindpere has cut the football out and stuck it on.
Oh, Volly, yeah.
That was his little
Yep.
thing. He used to have a pair of old school scissors stuck up for the purpose in his dark room there.
Yeah, righto.
And as his eyesight got worse, because by the time I got there in '89, he was half blind, really.
Yeah.
He still took brilliant photos, but he had to have a ball in it.
Yep.
But he would, and I saw him do it, and he would explain, boy, this is what we do to get the ball in it.
Yeah.
And as he got blinder, the edges like this one here, see how it's got a bit of a point on it?
Yeah.
Flat sides, yeah. Well, that's how they got, and then he'd stick it on with glue and then reshoot
Yeah, right.
the picture.
It looks the part though, doesn't it?
Well, just about. But
Almost.
yeah, but you see, they're actually going up here. It's almost, you see. But
Yeah.
the best one I ever saw was when everyone's going up like this, and there was no room up here to put it, so he just stuck it back here, and everyone's heading over this way.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know. He seemed to be cutting out new ones all the time. I don't know why he didn't keep the same.
Well, you needed different sizes, compared with how you've blown the picture up. So you can't have a tiny one with big players.
So he had to customise.
So you need a series of footballs to get one that looks good and that's in the right orientation too. It's no good having one sitting on its end. I do remember the Hasselblad. He had very good reasons why that was the only camera that was good enough for what we wanted to do.
That's Wally at work. Well, are the resting.
Well, it looks like he's not at work actually, and that is the telephoto. Oh, maybe it's not. No, I remember the telephoto lens being a bit longer. Is that the one, Brian? It's got the pistol grip
That
on
looks like the Hasselblad.
He had,
it. It is that, and that probably is the
he had
telephoto.
2 Hasselblads. Yes, and that was a telephoto lens that you screwed on the front.
Yeah, yeah. I certainly remember the colour, and it did have. It's hidden there. It must be on the other side, but a handle to it.
Wally had a plough ball, which bought in Germany, and he got friends to bring back all the way. And they worried all the way.
Sorry, have you got any other photographs? Because I'm going to prop that one.
No, I haven't got.
If you can prop it up on the screen, I'm going to take a shot of it. With,
I'd have to dig through.
well, Well, like I say, I've actually got some film footage because of him being on all the football videos that Ron Campbell did, Brian.
Oh, yeah.
And there's Volly running around at the end of it at every game, and of course, dramatically, of course, being Volly, because he's dancing, he dances around in front of him as they're coming round the oval. And
Before he got the telescopic lens, he used to run with the footballers and take the photos so he could get the good shot.
that's what you see him doing on the video.
And one day,
running along.
One day they had an umpire from Adelaide,
Yes.
and he said, "Who's that man on the course?" I said, "Well, that's photographer." And he said, "Get off." He kicked Wally off, and Wally came home very upset.
I was going to say, what did Volly say, or Wally say,
He
because
was kicked off the football field, and how did he get? He tried to tell him he was the photographer. He had to run. Anyway, next week he had the telescopic lens. And it was a show time at, I think it was Cummins, and he used to lie down on where the horses did the jumps.
Yes.
And this time the horse didn't quite jump and almost fell on him, and he rolled away and he said, "Save the camera."
Oh, good job.
Save the camera.
Well, he would. He would too, because
Someone said, "You were nearly a widow, Joan." But he loved horses. In the Estonian army, he was in the cavalry. He said his horse would do anything he commanded it. It was a wonderful horse.
so he was rather dashing.
He hated leaving it, but
Yeah. He was, I think he was a bit older than you at the time, wasn't he?
12 years difference.
Yeah. And he would have been rather dashing, because there's not that many dashing Estonian cavalrymen in Port Lincoln at any one time, Joan. Yeah, and
Well, there are about half a dozen Estonians in Lincoln. Ilmar Tova, who became mayor.
Kuno
Kuno
Sim,
Seaman, who was a great friend of Wally's. Wally
Wally
Livermore.
Livermaggie, Henno Pazook.
Henno Pasuk.
He was a high school teacher. Though they're all very well educated in their country.
Anne Hildner.
Yes. And his mum,
I'm going to have one more of those before I go.
was she Anne? Can't remember.
How long was it before he got to go back? What year was it? It was in he was able to go back in the 1980s, or?
He went back in 67 and took Karen, and it was still with Russian rule, and they still had their guns. And then he took me in 76, and they were still Russians there then.
Well, Soviets.
Yes,
Unwilling Soviets.
it was still under their occupation, still theirs.
Yeah.
But Ilmar lived to see the wall go down and communism collapse.
Well, we've seen so many changes. We've also seen just about the collapse of the United States as well at the moment.
Oh,
Like with yesterday's news, you're going, whoa.
poor Afghanistan.
Yeah, like another Vietnam, and you're looking, look, your guys' record hasn't been terrific, actually. Anyway, so we've also been through the CD, the video recording. Remember the old days of video rental shops used to rent you the machine?
I've still got some videos.
Really? Any of Wally?
Girls didn't want me to.
Of yourself? Home videos?
Oh, no.
Oh,
I meant videos.
yeah. Yeah, well, I remember when they came in and you used to rent the machine from the shop and take it home. And remember, it used to pop up at the top and you'd work out how to plug it in and get it working. And you've also lived through the newspapers. In fact, these days Facebook, I believe, is the founder even called it the biggest newspaper in the world. It's pretty much all Facebook. And in fact, the way, interestingly, that it operates in the country, no, it should be safe. The way it operates in the country now, the Port Lincoln Times really seems to have dropped away on those country contributors that you guys, encouraged and relied on in a lot of ways. And the local football and netball Facebook group pages operate as the local notice board. And so people post obviously photographs of local events on there. They put notices of upcoming events on there. One of the best examples was, or is someone going to Port Lincoln, can you pick me up something? Or to Sajuna, can you pick me up such and such? And it's all done on their local Facebook page. And one of the most interesting examples I saw was one day at Elliston, someone posted on their football netball page, the Rooster page, that there was a couple of dodgy fellas had just broken into the chap's ute. And he said, I'm pretty sure it was them because I don't know them and they're in a black ute, you know, so it's pretty easy to spot in Elliston. And, you know, shortly after this, someone posted that, yeah, they're by the jetty. And then shortly after that, well, then there was a whole, you know, about 12 posts by people. And then, you know, within 20 minutes, someone posted, don't worry, they're gone. And I thought, well, there you go. That's sort of local reporting in action.
Yeah, in action. Wally had a Swedish Volvo car that he loved. Big old tank of a thing.
It was a sports model, 242 GT.
It was a sports tank.
And
two-door one.
in Lincoln in those days, whenever you went shopping, you left the keys in the car, so you didn't lock your house. I remember we lived on Lincoln Highway, and I never locked my car, I just sat there. Anyway, one day Wally went to the chemist shop, I think, when he came out, his car was gone.
5 minutes later he'd be.
What?
He reckoned it was 5 minutes later.
Yeah, well, he's back, and the car's gone. So anyway, the police come to him next afternoon and said, oh, Wally, we found your car, it was at Lipson, the show was on, that's a little joint north of
Yes.
But it was very
out
wet.
of Tumby. It was a wet day, and the cops said, driving past, they said, oh, there's Wally's car parked on the paddock at the Lipson show, you know, a grassy paddock. They said, and there were two blokes in it. They said, well, let's give them a fright. So the cops put their siren on and whoos, came screaming up, and they said, well, come up with the car and jump out, arrest them. And they came up, and when they hit the brakes, because of the mud, their car didn't stop. And it kept going and bang into Wally's.
Bashed up our car.
No, the cops,
Which would have absolutely frightened the...
yeah, the cops, and we surrender, you know. The cops came to Wally and said, oh, we found your car, Wally. He said, oh, that's terrific. Where is it? And they said, oh, look, it's a bit damaged.
It's at the crash repair.
He said, those bastards, you give me 5 minutes alone with them and I'll belt them up for damaging my car. Police are shuffling their feet in this way. Actually, it wasn't them, it was us. Told Wally how they did it.
Yeah, they had weeks fixing that.
But they would have fixed it for him, so that's fine.
But Wally came, he said, look, my car. He said, some people were sitting there and they said, oh, we saw an old codger come in it, and an old codger got in it and drove it away. They didn't think it was stolen. Wally he didn't like being called an old codger.
No, he wouldn't have, no.
Let him come up here.
Student wins male medal.
See, that's the other thing now also, you don't get the fantastic write-ups back at the write-ups were good, like big old page.
Back when Alf was doing it.
Yeah, you don't get it anymore.
And Alf Goodwin was good.
Yeah, bloody oath, there were some fantastic write-ups. And
Well, he was the editor, he laid it out. But yeah.
very fair.
Well, I did all the write-ups for the Tasman's games, and
Did you?
I was very unfair, I must
Did you? You were
confess
a
that
bit
now.
biased?
I was quite biased, actually. Come to think of it, to be honest.
I've got to get hold of this one night and
Yeah, I'll drop it up to you if you want.
consume it better.
Oh, look, there's my name in it.
Yeah, there he is, Derek Rogers. So what era were you here?
89, 90.
Right,
I was here for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And then they sent me up to Ceduna.
right,
And then they sent me off to Murray Bridge after that.
yeah.
And then I went overseas for 4 years after that. Lincoln South swept aside myths of invincibility and triggered a frenzy of final speculation. That sounds like me.
It does, doesn't it?
By humbling Mallee Park at the Peckers' home ground. I've always approached football as art, you see. And this sounds like me, after 22 weeks of sweating bodies, crunching tackles and aching muscles. Yeah, it was me. I remember writing it.
But that's good. That's what We don't get that anymore. It's disappointing.
Back then you'd have all the team stats and...
Yeah. They had space back then because they had classified and paid for everything, which was a beautiful thing. But this is when they had coverage.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. And so this is, when is this?
1982.
Yeah, it is 82.
That's terrific coverage.
Yeah.
Back when the Times was great.
Yeah, it was.
Because, newsprint's really expensive and they just don't have the space anymore. It's just the good old days of coverage are gone.
Yeah. Most of it's all digital, isn't it? Yep. Still get some papers, but yeah.
Well, it's very expensive, of course, newsprint. There's not the advertising to support it anymore, I guess.
Yeah, that's right, because I don't know what their advertising budget would be, but mine was nearly $1 million, so it wouldn't be that much anymore.
No.
Even the classifieds, we used to run
the classifieds.
2 or 3 pages, they brought in heaps of money.
Well, that was the Rivers of Gold.
Yes. It was more so when Rural Press took over, where it got more and more demanding, and the good thing, there was only one good thing as far as Rural Press went, is I learnt so much more because I had no training.
Because you had to do more.
You just had to fit it in. I can remember going to my first car yard, to Phillips Toyota, with Brian Barnett came with me to show me how to use that Hasselblad.
It was hard. The film days were so hard compared to what they are now. And those people were true magicians. Volly was, amazing.
He was, and he would say, "Boy, come here." And you go, "Oh, I'm in trouble." And you go, "You see, here, I'll show you this." And you would have probably, "Girl, come here."
No, Hamilton.
"Hamilton, come here."
Be Hamilton! And you'd be like, you'd look up and you'd go, "Good photograph."
Yeah, that's right.
And then he'd just go, you'd be like, "Oh, thank God for that. Thank God for that. I did a good job. Okay, good photograph."
But it sounded the same whether you're in trouble or
But
whether
you
you're
used
getting...
to call all you guys were boy.
Yeah.
But I got Hamilton.
I just had a bit of a smile on my face when you said that he used to say, "Hey, boy." When I first started as a proofreader, he used to come in and he'd say, on print day, and he'd say, "Where's my block line girl? Where are my block lines?" And I'd quiver. And I went home and I said to Bill, "I don't think I'm going to last long there." And he said, "Why not?" And I told him. He said, "Oh, just don't worry about it." So the next time he said it, I said, "Volly, I don't know where your bloody block lines are. I don't care where your bloody block lines are." And he patted me on the shoulder and he said, "You be okay, girl." I thought that's what I needed instead of getting stressed for weeks after his bloody block lines.
Perfect.
Be like, "Oh, what have I done?"
Now I say Volly, and I've always said Volly, but it's actually Wally. Is you saying it like the German pronunciation of V, Wally, or am I pronouncing it just wrong in saying Volly? How is it spelt?
It's spelt, yeah. Well,
Voldemar.
His name was spelt V-O-L-L-Y, but they're V's or W's.
That's right. So in fact, Wally.
But most of his friends called him Volly.
Well, I called him Volly, I must confess.
That's where Volly was from.
Well, he was in 5 different armies during World War II.
What?
Because he started off, he was drafted as a young man into the Estonian army because he's Estonian. And after, well, early on in his service, the Soviet Union invaded and defeated Estonia. Estonia had been quite small. And then the Estonian army was incorporated into the Soviet Union army. So then he was part of the Soviet army, the Red Army.
Yep, that's roughly it. I think he was, I'm not sure about that he was ever in the Russian army.
Well, he'd just been fighting against them. And they'd just taken over his country, so he deserted and went and fought for the Finns, who are cousins of the Estonians. They've got a similar language. When did Volly come to Port Lincoln, Joan?
1948.
Mm-hmm. From?
Well, he was in Estonia, but from Germany. He came out and he was in Port Adelaide, and they sent him to Victor Harbour, where they had to put a breakwater, and the big boss was my mother's brother, which he didn't know at the time. Well, he didn't even know me. And then he had to go to Cowell, and from Cowell to Port Lincoln. And he used to say at Rotary, I arrived in Port Lincoln with £5 in my pocket, or no money at all. Now I can go to any shop in Lincoln and say, book it down to Wally Lindpere.
Because he did it tough there for a while.
Yes.
5, well, I was saying 5, Brian, 4 armies he was...
5. He was in the Estonian, and then the Russians invaded their country or came in, and all the army went into the Russian army. But he wasn't politically correct. His father was mayor of the district. And he and some friends and his brother escaped to Finland, because the Russians then tried the same thing with the Finns. And the president said, if you try and come in, you know, we'll go at war. And so he went and fought in the Finnish army.
Well, the Estonians and Finns are cousins, of course. Well, sorry, not cousins, but even their languages are uniquely...
And the same race.
They're not Indo-European, are they?
In the early days.
What?
They're linked to each other, but they're not Indo-European.
No, well, the language is Finno-Ugrian.
Hungarian,
Finnish, Estonian and Finns.
But excellent, good knowledge. And sorry, go on, Joan.
That's
fantastic, doing well.
When Wally took me back to Estonia, that's all I knew. But when we went with Karen in the, what was about 28 or something, they found lots of pockets in Mongolia that have the same, 14 lots now they find with the same. It's very confusing, isn't it? Their language. Anyway, no, so it was Estonian.
So he's in the Finnish army and he's a ski trooper, is that right?
Pardon?
He's a ski trooper, is that right?
I didn't.
A ski trooper on skis.
Oh yes, in all their war I think was fought on skis.
Yes.
And the last day of the war he was shot through the knee, so there was a German hospital ship in the bay that put him on that, took him to Germany, and then all of World War I he fought in the German army.
World War II.
In the Russian front, on the Eastern Front. Yeah. And right at the end of the war, he told me he trudged 3 days and nights without sleep to get into the western part, he got to an American camp where he was a displaced person, and he joined the occupation American army.
That's incredible, you know, because the Americans, I think he said, only enlisted about 50,000 or so to save them from the clutches of the Soviet army, of course, the Red Army. And he was one of them. And he, you know, he did it tough, but he was a tough man.
And I met him at a dance when he came here. And at university, he did Merchant of Venice. Their English professor had been to Oxford, and he was Shylock. And when I took him home to tea, Brian had just been Shylock in the Merchant of Venice at Port Lincoln High School. Wally told me it was like learning another language. He'd learned English, but to learn Shakespearean, he said, was like another language.
It is.
And they had a big speaking part, Shylock.
Yeah, so he was certainly not shy, was he? Not shy.
Well, he'd been an officer in the army, so
oh, really?
He was used to commanding.
He was, boy, come here. And then we get there, here, I'll show you something. So he fought on skis for about another year, and the Finns actually defeated the Soviet Union in the first war when the Soviets invaded, and then in the second one they lost. And then when they lost, rather than, of course, end up being handed over to the Soviets, which would have been extremely...
He didn't like the Soviets at all.
Yeah, but it would have been, he wouldn't have lasted more than about 5 seconds. He would have been shot. And so he then went and fought for the Germans, who were fighting against the Russians also. So he didn't so much fight for Nazi Germany, he went to fight... He didn't like the Russians. Yeah, he went to fight for whoever was fighting against the Russians, who were the enemy. Traditional enemy, really, of the Estonians. Anyway, so he ended up in the German army until the end of the war, and then having fought for not only the Finns but then the Germans against the Russians would have been extremely bad news if he was handed over to the Soviets. So the Americans, for a small number of very fortunate ex-Soviet soldiers, enlisted him in their army. So he was part of the American army for about 6 months.
Incredible story.
Managed to come out to Australia, and then he came out to Port Lincoln to work, I think, in the cement factory, because they all had to do 2 years of manual labour before they could choose whatever their, so doctors would, for example, from a Polish doctor getting to Australia would have had to do 2 years in the cement factory before they could resume as a doctor or a teacher or whatever it was, or an engineer or whatever, which got the Snowy River, Snowy Mountain
the skiing done.
built. Yeah. And so it was during that time that he met and dramatically fell in love with Joan, who was the daughter of the local newspaper proprietor.
The Hill family.
The Hill family, and got to own and run a newspaper and grow beautiful flowers.
Orchids.
Orchids.
It was orchids. He loved orchids.
Wally's orchids. Oh, yes. He loved the orchids and joined the orchid club, and then it becomes like a sickness. A bit of the garden would go, and up would go an orchid house, and then another orchid house. And when he died, there were 400 cymbidiums, plus a hothouse with hothouse orchids. So I managed to give them all away.
Yeah, and we were treated to the orchids because when I arrived,
we would all have to do the orchid show every year. Without fail, front page orchid
front
show.
page every year.
As well as the almond blossoms, front page every year.
That's right. That's one of the charming things about local press is that, of course, you do end up covering the owner's Rotary. Of course, if the owner or the editor is a Rotarian, you'd end up covering Rotary meetings pretty well. But I was going to say, that's right. I started actually a week.
The Orchid Club.
I first met your mother. I started work at the Port Lincoln Times a week or 2 weeks, a couple of weeks earlier. Probably about 6 weeks earlier because I'd actually spent a couple of weeks staying at Joan Volly's.
Okay.
I reckon, so it might have been a month or so. Your mum was senior because she'd done university. I was coming straight out of high school, so she was the senior cadet and I was a first year. So I think you came in at probably third year, only had to do 1 year of cadetship. It was a 4 year
6 months, I think.
6 months, yeah. Whereas I had to do 4 years. So I was doing training on the job, what your mum had done at university sort of thing. Anyway, and but you got to stay at Joan and Volly's also. Yeah, which is a beautiful house just near Sam's on the foreshore. And
Sam's sister owns it now.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Fantastic.
Susie owns it.
It'd be good to go back and see it. It was a beautiful house and beautiful orchids and wonderful people. And at that time, we're just talking about collating. We used to have to go out. Everyone, the journalists and everyone, used to have to go out and put the paper together because the press was only big enough to print half the newspaper. That's true, isn't it?
It is. And I can remember whenever it threw a plate or did something wrong, John would go, Jesus wept. And Joan would tell him off and he'd say, it's the shortest verse of the Bible, Joan. And we used to...
I actually remember that.
Oh, I can't. And then if he said it again, she'd say, come on, girls, and we'd go out.
Oh, really? I don't remember that.
Riley.
Maybe she was a bit hardened to it by the time I got there.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Jesus wept.
Yeah.
John.
But the collating was all hands on deck.
Yes, yeah, and all the inserts at Christmas time, I drove you nuts. But that was good money. Now you get them home delivered.
What, you got paid extra for doing the collating?
No,
that was all part of the job.
It was good money for the Times.
Oh, good money for the Times, yeah.
I
guess you got
there was a regular charge.
You were selling them, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was terrific.
We used to charge Coles or Woolies or whatever, so it was good. Good money came in there. So that doesn't happen too much now.
You didn't mind the collating?
No.
It was all money, 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 money. Great.
And it was quite funny because often Volly would go over then and buy a carton of beer for the boys and the girls would get nothing. And then Heather Ettridge and I one day, we'd had a really rough day and it was very late. And she said, blow this, we're going over to get a carton of West Coast coolers. And that's what we had.
And that became a tradition?
Yeah.
Good.
That's right.
Because that was hard yakka. And you just got all that black stuff on your hands. The press didn't last long actually. Royal Press came in after we'd been
They
there
took
about
it.
2.5
They took it
years.
to Maitland, I think, or they took it somewhere. Because it was a gold mine. They've gone, whoa, you've got one of these presses sitting here that is worth millions. Right, we'll have that. So they took the press. Because everything was centralised. It's like, why is one little paper? And we were just printing the...
2 papers.
The Sentinel and the Tribune.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, they were all printed at the Times.
Yep.
But yeah, so everything. There used to be a staff. Oh no, it was massive when we started, wasn't it?
Well, when we first started there, I remember there were a couple
Remember the
of
comps? They were
proofers.
hilarious.
When we first
Proofreaders,
started,
yeah.
there was-
Maxine
I
Tag
think
was a
Maxine was a
proofreader.
proofreader.
Yeah, we had a proofreader.
That was what I did. They'd be, when the big long sheets had come out wet, we'd hang them up on a peg to dry, and then we'd proofread them, and there were signs for delete and all of that.
Because it was marked in what colour pencil?
Just black pen or whatever. And so Maxine Tag used to read to me and I'd mark the proof. And then it'd go back to the typesetters and they'd correct it. But I always got in trouble with Malcolm Lucas and he's the only person who called me Elizabeth. And my V's and R's look very similar and I'll write quickly and he used to tell me off.
The proofreading, I reckon, lasted until about 1990, I reckon, because there was possibly yourself and Max were there proofreading when I arrived in 1989.
Yeah.
And then that was the first position
And
that
then
was
when
made
Terry
redundant.
Kemp was advertising manager and I went as a rep.
Yes.
Then when he got sick, I became advertising manager.
Yes, that's right. But I certainly remember you proofreading, and in fact, the standard of the paper noticeably went down when they did away with proofreading.
That's right.
Because typos obviously stayed in,
And there were little idiosyncrasies like Bascom's in Port Lincoln were Bascom's with an E. Mona Bascom from Elliston was without an E, so you had to correct that all the time.
So it's not just the English language, in fact you're talking about the local knowledge.
Absolutely, yes.
And I have made that same mistake with the Bascons at Elliston actually.
Sure, everybody has.
only once.
Yes, Mona would have let you know.
They will, yeah.
So the production girls would have to type everything in. There'd be a letter to the editor. They'd have to type everything in. Nobody emailed anything. It was like a little slot in the door and bits of paper would be slotted in, like the footy reports, the hockey reports, everything would come in, and then the typesetters have to try and read this writing. Or Alf Goodwin would put it together, the sport.
Yep.
He'd sit at his desk and rewrite everything. Don't do that, please.
That's good, isn't it?
He would rewrite everything and then he'd have all these little pieces of paper that were stapled together, and then the girls would type it all up. And then it would be, no, I think they'd just cut it. Like it was the old days that you'd have to write the most important thing in your story would have to be at the top, and then you'd funnel down like it was like a V, a triangle, and down the end, if that's, you put the least important information down there, because if your story came out and it was like, oh, it's a bit long, and it's like a, it'd be a sheet of paper like this that we've got to stick down. Oh, it's too long for this space. Chop.
They'd literally cut it. These days,
actually
they talk about
cut.
cutting it.
Yep,
they literally chopped it off the bottom.
In the bin. So you would always have to put the most important information in maybe the first 3 pars so that it didn't get chopped. Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, and when they couldn't change around words and stuff because they're literally cutting the piece of paper with a knife, like they would just really chop it. They couldn't really.
Yeah. Well, I remember they would actually, if there was a typo or something and they had another because somewhere and you'd spelt because wrong, it'd be like they'd cut it out and it'd be like kind of stuck on there.
Yeah,
so occasionally it'd look a little bit wonky in the paper because it was actually stuck on the page, yeah.
Do you have any funny ones?
Well, only David's story, Stephen Capelluti, he was an apprentice, Kappa, and he was very determined to learn comping, and he did his first front page and he was so proud of it, and we were all watching him. It must have been terrible. And he's standing back there and he's looking at this first page and checking it all out, make sure all the lines are in the right spot. And David was the person who checked it, right, because he was an apprentice. So he says, yeah, David, I've finished, you know, check it out. And David looks and he goes, oh, you idiot, Kappa. And Kappa's like, what? And he said, you've got the O upside down. And he got his knife and cut it and then he realised that
Times humour.
Got the O upside down. Oh dear. Yeah.
That's probably been done before, that one.
Oh, I'm sure it's been done many, many times.
Each page was individually done and like went through the waxer. So the print would come out, the photos would come out with all the dots. They'd been turned into dots, and they'd come out and they'd be cut out by the comps and they'd be stuck here and there.
And of course, at that stage, you couldn't see the pages you were laying it out either. So they.
We just had those little sheets where
Well,
you go
full size.
picture.
I mean, financially, the best of times for us when we converted to computer setting and offset printing. In the old days, under the letterpress regime, it was just so labour intensive, everything we did. Not like the handset paper where you had to diss everything, although we had to diss the handset headings, but that's nothing, you know, hours bloody work. But it was a tremendous saving. And I think of printing the bloody Sentinel between, well, it was Streaky Bar originally when we bought it, and then we moved it to Sojourner later on because Sojourner was booming. And we used to use a clichograph, no, not clichograph, what was it, the thing you type on?
What, linotype?
No.
Oh.
And it sends a thing.
Like a fax?
Not a fax, before the fax machine. Quite primitive. Oh, I'll think of it in a minute. You know, you had a keyboard, you typed it, and it went through to the same machine at Sojourner, and it printed out what you'd fed into it in Lincoln. But not like a fax machine where you could take the actual thing and put in.
No, you had to do it.
No, you actually had to type it in.
And then it had to be reset.
Well, it's basically, it's probably what I'm talking about. I would type it in and it would feed out through a landline at the other end as a paper thing, but I didn't get to see the paper. Maybe it's the same thing what you're talking about.
It was before.
Because you would punch in, obviously.
It was just outside my office door, the machine.
Because the thing I'm talking about had a big metal hood on it, great big metal hood, and a little tiny screen.
And I'm not sure.
I was at the Sentinel back in 1991.
You were?
Yeah, I did the Sentinel when Rural Press first bought it.
Right.
From Joan and Volly, who had the Times as well.
Yeah.
I was at the Port Lincoln Times, and they sent me up as a cadet to see if it was possible for one person to do everything. Because David Wright was there before that, and there was a photographer, and there was a couple of other people.
Yeah.
And then David was sent off to the Northern Argus, where I think he still is. And they sent me up there as a kid to see if I could do everything. So I'd be there at 2 in the morning, right, typing up the netball teams for this week and the CWA report, the tea towel of the week, and got an ancient 1991. This computer must have been from about 1980, I reckon.
Yep.
It was a big old metal hood like this with a little tiny green screen on it. Only text, you couldn't see any pictures. These days, they think they've got it hard. They don't know.
They have no idea.
They have no idea because you had to work it all. Had to work it all out by hand, and then put the coordinates for everything. And because this computer had no memory, there was no template. You just had to tell it everything. You had to tell it the point size, the font, the gutter width, the everything. It had to be told, and of course it had no memory, so that you, if it crashed, which it did probably a couple of times a day, every day, then you simply lost everything you were working on at that time, because what you had to do was work on a page, send that file to Whyalla, and then it was obviously in the system. But until then, you had nothing. So you would, to do a page would take, obviously hours. And if you had nearly done it, it just crashed, then you just started again. And it taught you to work, and it taught you enormous patience under enormous duress. And literally it would feed out the other end as paper, and they just had to stick the photographs on it.
But this came big type, didn't it? Didn't it have to be set for that?
Yeah, then you had to reset it from the...
It came big type.
Say,
Oh, right.
so when Justin Brady was editor at Ceduna, he'd write a story, then the girl would type it into this machine in Ceduna. It would come out in Port Lincoln as type, then we would have to reset it from that.
So it was simply to send the words.
Well, there's lots of handling of it.
Do you know what it was? Gestetner.
Brilliant, it was too.
It was a Gestetner.
Thank you, Betty. Well, probably labour is probably, you mentioned, I remember, there was a sudden big jump in labour. I reckon probably didn't help, just as newspapers were probably, I guess at their sort of peak, I guess, and then around about the mid-90s they put up wages dramatically by probably, I reckon, because I was as a cadet making $160 a week when I started.
Yeah, the old cadet wages. I can remember my 21st having like, I think it was like some cheap passion pop wine, could not even afford a bottle of bloody, and I think we had sausages. That was it, sitting on the balcony, just had a couple of sausages each, Lisa, Georgie and I. It was her 21st, 4 days later, drinking this non-alcoholic wine because that was all we could afford from Woolies. It was so sad. And I'm like, payday in 2 days, we'll be fine. And then we ate toast.
I was on $160 a week when I first started. You would have been on more. What were you on?
240 I would have been on.
240 would have been on.
I would have been rolling in it.
Because I was talking about being a third year, that's right, yeah. When I was on 240. And then because Brownie would see me in the pub every Thursday night, I reckon I'd get the paper out and then jump in the car and drive down to stay with you and Russell and hit the pubs. And he'd see me at the Lincoln, I reckon, or the pier every Thursday night. And then after a couple of months of that, he said, look, you're going to be down here every week, aren't you? And I said, yeah. Brownie put it up to $280 a week because I was driving to Port Lincoln so often. He gave me the petrol money. He didn't, he wasn't all bad. He gave me the petrol money.
So when you worked at Ceduna, were you on your own?
I would be sitting there at 3 o'clock in the morning typing in the bowls results and the CWA report. The tea towel of the week, Brian. I've seen it all. To get the Sentinel out, I was working like 100 plus hours a week for $240 a week.
Original material.
Yeah. Brenton's advice to me, which I've always gone by, was that he said, don't worry about the people with the titles, go to the people who are doing the work.
Yeah, that's right. I can remember Brenton telling me one day this funny story about how his auntie or somebody at Cow, and she was in the CWA and they had to stand up and say their married name. And she said, my name is whatever, Rehn. Before I was married, I was done. And everybody cracked up.
Brenton, he mentored me when they sent me up to Ceduna.
Oh, a lovely fella.
Yeah, I had Brenton for about 3 or 4 weeks, probably about 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Just to show, because I was just a cadet.
Yeah.
And Rural Press had just bought the two papers.
Yeah.
From Joan and Volly and Brian. Yeah, and so they sent me up there to see if one person could do everything.
Yep.
So Maxine Tagg went
Took over from, well, actually there was one fella there who lasted 3 weeks after me, and then Maxine came in and took over after him because he didn't last more than 3 weeks. It was a bit much for him.
A local from the Times?
No, he was from Whyalla. Now his surname was Smart. Now he had a nickname for himself, which I'm pretty sure was Max, and he was there doing advertising, and he always bagged me for, because I whinge about, how full, because it was, I picked up a coffee habit because I was working about 120 hours a week to get that paper out by myself. Because like I say, there was no typesetter, so I'd be sitting there all through the night, and that was why I had to sit up through the night, because there was just simply so much typing to get through, Even, it was only probably about 16 pages. But everything that went into that paper was me, and like I say, it was laborious laying out and no one had laid out the paper before because Barney had done it in Port Lincoln. So they set me up there in $240 a week, and I laid out the paper, and it was the first time they'd ever tried to do it from Ceduna. managed to do it. This guy here took over my job, and after many caustic comments about, I remember he said to me one day, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. But I managed to do it. I never missed deadline while I was there. I never missed deadline. Because that was put on me that it was life or death, that you couldn't miss deadline because there was so many other papers they were printing at Whyalla. So I never missed deadline, did it, and then he lasted 3 weeks, couldn't get the paper out. And Maxine came in and could do it. So she was a good stick. She was in that little room doing...
She was out the back.
Yes, she was out the back, that's right. And then I think she...
A very bright girl.
Very bright girl, very switched on. Yeah, and shamefully I scared the life out of Jeremy, her brother, one day driving too fast to Elliston. But Jeremy, I apologise for that. That was foolish, I was young. But we lived. Do you want to hear how I nearly killed Jeremy?
Yes.
Well, I was in Brownie's new Fairlane when he first got it, and we didn't have any other cars available and we were going to Elliston. Jeremy was doing advertising, so he jumped in with me. Anyway, so this poor handling big car, and we're hanging out around this big bend, and it's cut out the side of a hill, so it drops away into a pine plantation on one side, and there's a hillside on the other. Anyway, and I'm on the other side of the road. Idiot. These days I would punch myself right in the nose. Anyway, and this four-wheel drive pulling caravan comes around the other way, and we're stuck on the other side of the road there, and you can't do anything about it, and we're hanging over like this. Anyway, and so my first thought was, right, I'm going into the pines, because I'm going to crash straight into the thing. And then I was like, it was amazing how time stopped, because I had the time to process. Like, obviously I didn't have any time at all, but I remember going, right, no, Jeremy's here, can't do that. All right, in that case, and I managed to, I remember going through methodically working this out, as obviously I had, I had no time to think about it. Anyway, so the only way I can do this, I worked out the angle is to get two wheels off into the gravel, so I just had two wheels and just hanging onto the bitumen. I was a fair way into just to get the angle, and I just kept my eye on that spot, and then we went vroom, and I remember seeing the driver of the four-wheel drive and his missus looking at me going, because they were about to die, as we whizzed past, I don't know how close.
I bet you never told Brownie that.
No, certainly not. But anyway, I certainly owe Jeremy a big apology, and he didn't let me drive home, of course. Anyway, yeah, crazy. I mean, it was interesting, the whole thing about country papers is that you work so hard in country papers. And later on in city papers, like when I was at the Mercury, you get, you turn up at 8:30 in the morning, and then at 9:30 you get by that stage an email from the news editor saying, here's your 2 or 3 stories for the day. There was hardly anything to do. Most of it was just a phone call because you had a press release. She just handed out press releases. It was so lazy, I couldn't believe it. And this is News Limited, Mercury. And it was like you hardly had to do any work at all. In fact, you used to get mould growing all over the keyboards. The bigger the paper you went to, the more disgusting. Because people would be sitting around, coffee, cake, spilling stuff on the keyboards, and the keyboards were disgusting. and you do 6 stories a night. It was so easy, and in country papers, you absolutely...
Well, that's right, you're doing the lot. Yep. Very true.
2 journalists that got Walkley Awards, so...
Daphne Freeman being one of them.
Jock Halbert got one first, and then Daphne second. So we're very proud of that.
Well, the Port Lincoln Times is one of the big regional newspapers. And still will be online, but sorry.
Daphne was born the same day as Joan.
Yes, we met at high school, and she lived with us for 4 years.
She came down from the bush, Kaiorpa or somewhere.
Really, is that right?
And then she lived with us while she went to
high school.
Magnificent. So you obviously must have had some family connection before that. How'd she come to live with you? You obviously knew her before, or?
No, Joan met her at school.
Oh, simply because you guys...
I met her at first day at high school.
Actually, I had the same birthday.
She was standing alone on the veranda.
Same year,
She said, why don't you come live with me?
And I went up to her and I said hello, told her my name. I said, would you like to come and meet my friends? She said yes. And she'd come from a little one-room school from grade 1 to grade 7 and went to high school. And then she was staying with Rellies at the end of the week. They said it wasn't going to work out. So I raced down to my mother and I said I'd met my twin and now she couldn't come to high school. Mum said, well, she can come and live with us. So we got in touch with her parents and Daphne fitted in very well.
Yeah, well, she was intelligent, individual.
Yes, she was dux of the high school.
Oh, really? There you go.
And won the sporting. trophy for the year.
What was her big sport?
Yes, at the end of the year, yeah.
What was her particular sport?
Oh, your sports day.
Oh, athletics.
Yes, running, jumping, so forth.
Yeah. Well, I remember her fearlessly going out on the job in a yellow raincoat, yellow boots and a yellow rain hat. She didn't care.
What, to do a story? She used to do the going back and go up the country and meet different people and write their life story.
And that's what she won her Walkley Award for.
No, she won it for a farmer from Port Neal when things were very bad, and wrote about the farming.
The drought. The drought, is that right?
Yes. No, was it a drought?
I thought it was the drought. I mean, she was, of course, I turned up in 1989 and that was the year after she won it in 1988.
Yes.
And that was sort of like the peak of the drought, I think, Brian, 1988. And so, and I took over from her as the rural roundsman. And so she filled me in, of course, on, on what was going on. And obviously what had just happened. I mean, she just won a Walkley for covering it, so it was obviously fairly dramatic and interesting. So she had a lot to tell me about.
The United Farmers and Stock Owners has described the drought as a disaster on a par with the Ash Wednesday bushfires. The Upper Eyre Peninsula has received less than half of its average annual rainfall, and where there's no grain, stock numbers are now down by 50 to 80%.
We never even got our grain back that we sowed last year, and our sheep, they were really feeling the pinch. Only got half of them left.
If the drought continues, many farmers will go to the wall, and as 40% of the state's grain is produced by the Eyre Peninsula farmers, that'll have dire consequences for the state's economy. Pat Furlan, 7 News.
Yeah, they would have been tough times.
And those farms were initially, what were they growing?
Oh, I suppose they were sitting on 5 bags there, Gus. I suppose not much fertiliser went in. I can remember my old grandfather saying, when he had a look at one of our blocks, one of our crops on the new ground, he said, "Oh, not enough super." And you know, we were a bag to 2, 90 pounds. And we asked the old fellow what was he putting on. Oh, a bag to 6, plenty. Yeah. So, yes, it got pretty thin back on them, so I guess their yields weren't real smart.
Obviously, it's marginal country.
That's right.
A lot of sand. In fact, land care started in this part of the world.
That's right.
Ah, yeah. Because if you don't look after the land, it's virtually a fossil. It's not quite a fossilised desert. You know, you've got the sand ridges and the clay flats, and if you don't look after it, the ridges drift and the flats don't do all that well.
Which is exactly right. I mean, if you don't look after it, it blows away blows off over into the neighbour's
into the neighbour's fence and buries their fences and makes a darn nuisance of itself.
Yeah, all over the road and the neighbours. You can see it all around the area. The sides of the road are, you know, 1.5 metres higher than the...
3/4 of the way up a mallee tree.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, thank God for the new technology.
A lot couldn't pay the high interest.
And there was 26%.
Oh, yeah, it was very high for them.
It was ruinous, is what it proved to be.
You mentioned the 1930s, a depression. It wasn't drought years, but a depression. Is it similar to what we're going through now?
Well, it's a different sort of setup, really. Everyone managed to survive in the 30s. Our expenses were nothing like they are today.
1929, I got 1 3 a bushel for my wheat, barley and oats less, wool 9pence, butter 6pence, eggs 2pence. The more you produce, the more you owed. 1930, I lost 2 farms in the depression. 1931, I married Connie, the eldest daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Owen at Yucanditchi. 1930, with the assistance of the Agriculture Bureau, Lindpere, was called Lindpere.
Agriculture Bureau.
And I won 12 crop competitions.
That's right.
and 1964 I got 600 tons of hay, sold for 500 ton. 1936 I got another 600 ton, sold 500. Sold 500, and 1945 I sold 400 acres of standing crop to the Yanani farmers. 1945 I had 300 sheep, too many, and was no abattoirs at Lincoln and no transport to Lincoln, to Adelaide. And I rang up a farmer 24 miles away who had a piggery which was given 2 shillings and 1 shilling, and I said you could have this 300 sheep for nothing if he came to my door for them, and he said no. He said he'll take them if I bring them halfway. And I said, of course, he knew I would.
More self-sufficient, would you say?
Yes, more self-sufficient, right. Everyone had a few cows, few pigs, and nobody ever had any sheep those days. Or very few, we never had any.
So I came in, I guess, I reckon 89 was probably the end of the drought, so it probably wasn't so bad. But she told me about the amalgamation of the two clubs, Kindcutter and Warramboo, and she told me how much they'd hated each other and how remarkable that was.
Henry McKenna and Madigan never wore the doggy Guernsey. You, the doggy Guernsey, you wore both. Who would you sooner be, a doggy or a tiger? Well, there's no tigers around nowadays, so I have to be a doggy.
Yeah, that was a bloody good amalgamation, that one.
Tell me about it.
Oh, well, just it's the same, virtually the same thing. You know, like, that was when they was putting the series system in at Woodner, and Warramboo had a few players from that, and we did too. And when that finished, both sides just battled.
Just suddenly felt pinch at the same time.
Yeah, and so something had to be done.
Mm.
And that was unreal. You know, we're all pretty good mates anyway off the field. We used to play it pretty hard against each other.
Well, you played, what, 100 or so games or more with Kindcutter first?
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't have a clue, to be honest with you.
Well, 100 or so, maybe 200, and then so you're certainly well versed in the Kindcutter.
Yeah, I think.
Thing?
Yeah, 74 to whenever they amalgamated.
Yeah, and how long did you play for the Bulldogs?
To 2000. I was 42 when I played my last game.
Gonzo runs straight at the ball, turns on his right. It's a high kick down the centre half forward area. Only to see it marked there by Eyre Perry. Perry goes back on the left in the direction of Danga Kill. She's got front position, can't hold it. All spoiled away there, knocked away there. Keneally moves through there, handball off in the direction of Bucky Beinke. Bucky Beinke runs straight at the ball, picks it up on the left, and it's a top kick. It's a nice kick. It's a goal to Central here at the first one. A very handy one for him, Greg.
Yeah, it was, Jeff. It was a good running goal. They put the ball out in front and run on it. That's what the name of the game's about, and that's what they've been getting their goals doing. To whirl in the other, they've got to get the ball out of centre. We got Gonzo never going to contest the ruck again.
Yep. And how many premierships had you played in at that point?
With Cayenne, or, well, I don't know. I mean, I think I played in 14 or 15 all up.
Yeah, it's just success was expected around Kindcutter, wasn't it?
Oh.
And then when it became Central there.
In that 87, when we amalgamated in 1987, Warrnambool and Coolangatta cleared 36 players in the off-season, and that really forced the amalgamation. But
we had those guys working on the waterworks or the sewage.
That's right, yeah, LRM boys, and a few. There was a downturn in farming, and a few of the lads were going away for work. And,
so the two things, all that drought and stuff.
Yes, all that and sort of.
But the sewage boys leaving, so it sort of made it, as you say, happen.
Yeah, it did, and it was all good. It all went off pretty smoothly.
Well, yeah, and as it turns out, yeah. Well, you were related to a lot of them.
Yeah, a few there, I suppose, yeah.
There's obviously Sampson's over there and whatnot.
Yeah. Oop, down he goes. Following football, I haven't seen amalgamation work very well, but I always thought this Warrnambool Coolangatta, as far as the football goes, they really worked. But they were keen blokes. You know, you had the Sampsons at Warrnambool and the Sampsons at Coolangatta.
Because Central Air started, what, 1988?
87.
Oh, 87?
Yeah.
Because that was an interesting time when all the mergers happened, wasn't it?
Yeah, we're the start of the mergers in Midwest League.
Do you remember a bit about that?
Oh, a little bit, not a lot.
Yeah. You were involved at the time, though, obviously. But it was organised by other people, or?
Yeah. There's a couple of other blokes probably had more to do with it than I would have.
What was your opinion?
Well, yeah, Warrnambool and Coolangatta clubs never liked each other. That's the funny part that I see.
And it was a fierce disaffection too.
Yeah, it was. But we had to get together, otherwise things would have fell right apart.
How many premierships in a row was that?
3 for this round.
So how many premierships for the Central Air Bulldogs?
9.
9. And how many blokes today played from Warrnambool? How many from Coolangatta?
So about half and half nearly.
Jake Bruce on his left to Jake Sampson. Jake Sampson handballs across to Haydn Heath.
Uncontested mark.
Haydn Heath with a kick. And a very, very good mark taken by Jared Sampson in front of
Kyle Renshaw.
It is Kyle, is it? Yep.
I believe it was Fridge's father's suggestion.
Yeah, he was the secretary of the Warrnambool, the Coolangatta clubs got together and did the merger, so it was good. So.
Yeah, it was an unpopular suggestion.
It's the old school didn't like it, but all us young guys went to school together at Woodner.
Yeah, right.
So that's what it's all about.
So you said it had to be.
Yeah, and well, it's the future.
Yeah.
And now with the cricket, from now on, they're the yellow caps in cricket and we're the blue caps.
Yeah, right. So you're going to kill each other all summer? Yeah. All right, look forward to that. Thanks very much, man. Fantastic.
No worries. Got a Central Air bloke. Lindsay said you can't do that to him. Brett McComb, the ruckman, he's come up with a free there somehow, off the ball. Brett McComb on the left to half forward. They fly high. Here comes Clint Winter on his left, natural left. He's kicked it, and there's another goal.
Yep. There's the 3 in reply anyway.
There's
the 3 in reply.
Undisciplined play.
Yep.
In the centre of the ground.
Yeah, very good.
Any special comments? Want to say hi to your mum or anything?
Nah, it's all good.
Couple of good heads for radio in here, I think.
You want to say hi to Fridge's mum?
No, I don't even know Fridge's mum. Sure, goes up, puts it exactly where Dolling wanted it.
Handball.
Gets the hand pass out.
Out the space.
Cam Mont. Hang
Cross
on.
to Macca Heath.
Macca gets the hand pass out.
Do you want to be quick?
Closing fast.
Closing real fast.
Closing
Kicks
very
it to
fast.
no. Ah! Jared Sampson with the mark of the day. Deep in the fourth quarter. Sees an option in Jake Sampson. Looks across. He's got Ty McKenna leading at him. And Ty takes it out in front of his eyes, probably 45. Hang on, he looks up. He's got an option in Jake Bruce, is it?
Which is pretty cool. In fact, one of the delightful ironies of Eyre Peninsula, that you've got so much great material there.
The Australian Wheat Board recommendation was that each bag should have a minimum 18 stitches and sewn through both seams. However, not many sewers sewed to this recommendation, and an average of 10 stitches sewn properly did the job. Technology has, of course, changed farming methods dramatically since the 1950s era.
Some of the bagged grain would be handled up to 10 times before it reached its overseas destination.
Yeah, this is incredible what they used to do.
Wendy Trelaw gave me that footage.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the old dumping bags. Sleeveless shirts, no sunscreen.
The vision shows me pulling a wheat stack down at Caldale railway siding, with Terry Lovegrove assisting on the slide and Jim Cronin lumping into the truck. Jim and I shifted grain out at sidings all over Eyre Peninsula and also in Australian wheat board and Australian barley board depots. Jim and I and Dan Fitzgerald loaded 20,000 bags of wheat at Caldale from Monday morning to Friday night in one shift. This was an average of 4,000 bags a day. The jute bags were very abrasive and loading out necessitated wearing long trousers.
They were soldier settlers, so they were doers, and they were isolated soldier settlers. So you had someone like Lance Puckridge get hold of some pretty good gear, pre-Super 8.
Pretty bloody good.
Yeah.
What sort of movie was it, Pete? Obviously wasn't a Super 8 thing. It was
Standard 8, aren't they? That's what Dad's...
Don't those Super 8s, they jump a bit, don't they?
Yeah, well, I think Super 8s came along afterwards.
Yeah, they were the more easy to operate version, weren't they? And sort of more of a cassette type thing than these are the old films that used to...
Standard 8, I reckon.
Yeah.
They were only 4 minutes. And then Dad just used to put them all together.
Oh, yeah.
Splice them, he called it, didn't
he? Yep, splicing machine.
Yeah, he had a glue.
Yep, which you used to have to do halfway through the film while we were watching. You'd hear it and you'd get this slight melting thing and then you'd go flick, 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 flick.
Can you fast forward a little bit, Joe, or not?
Okay.
Just...
So Billy's starting to loosen up.
Old chuff. Oh, there's Rodeo again.
Same one.
Just see, yeah, unless they didn't get it on the first one. I reckon this is a new bit. Yeah, I reckon it's...
Yeah.
That's what I said.
So that was at the wash pool, was it, I presume?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a part of it's still there.
Yeah.
Ron said, yeah, because I wanted to show him this.
Now here we are, this is footy.
Oh, here we go, here's footy. Now Pete, tell me what year, that's going back, because that's your V. See that?
Try and go back a bit. Oh, don't go back to the
Was that way backs?
Sorry, that went back to the end.
I just reckon this is probably the oldest footy that his dad's got on. Do you see that V?
I didn't catch it, no.
Yeah, so I'm thinking it might be going back fairly well.
Yeah.
Ah, there you go.
Yep, everything was done by hand, everything. That's Cliff Dobbins hitting his hand with a hammer. You can see the old Wangari Oval there, and there's the, presume it's the dinner shed because the fence is up.
Yep. So I don't know that I've seen this before.
Oh, you would have back in the day, yeah.
Like 50 years ago.
Yeah. So they open. There's the Fergie, brand new, I'd reckon. Two Fergies. They opened it in 58, so I presume this is 56 or 7.
Yep.
Whereas in all the major centres like Port Lincoln, people were pretty much satisfied with the coverage that they got from the local media. So no one felt the need to pick up a camera.
I don't think in my time of playing there was any video stuff, but there is some that's come in back, probably started in the 80s.
When Ron Campbell started in around about 80, 81 is when...
Ronnie was the one who sort of got it going.
And he was fantastic at it.
Oh, no talking there. Rogers got the ball, handballs it out well, picked up by Kurovic. Kurovic handballs it to Basham. Basham sets himself, goes for a run through the middle. Not a strong kick down.
But the shooting's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, he gets right into it.
Picked up there by Sanic. He handballs on the Franklin. Franklin runs around, kicks the ball right into the... Oh, that was a top mark by... Unbelievable mark. Unbelievable mark taken there by Hagi. I don't even think he knew he had it, but the thing was he tried, he went up, and it was a spectacular mark.
he wasn't just, you know, it was quite a smooth sort of. Yeah.
Davey again has gone through and taken out Amber. Weight being used heavily here at the moment. No one able to get possession. Here's Hull. He'll steady things down with his class around plenty of Mallee Park opponents, but his kick's a poor one. Dudley it is, fires the ball back in. There's Edwards, but here's a fine mark to Miller. Great mark to Bradley Miller for Mallee Park. And here's the way he kicked that last one, Pip. I reckon he could go close to kicking this one here.
Certainly give it a nasty nudge. Blowing it up. Who classes of players here, but he lets it go short. And Freeman Puckridge chips in for Marble Range, and he clears for Marble Range out towards, clears up towards the half-forward line.
But Puckridge, who's starting to come into the play strongly at centre half back.
Freeman Puckridge here, centre half back, played a great game today. One of the old campaigners of 78. Great game, Free. What do you think about today?
Good win today. I don't think the game was probably hard as it was in 78, but it's good to see a lot of younger fellas back up in the game, keeping us older fellas going. You know, we're getting on a bit, some of us. It was a really good feeling after the game.
Isn't it amazing to have interviews from them?
Never seen any of that before.
How does it feel?
Feels really good.
Because that was done by Ron Campbell.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Is where Port Lincoln's been really lucky.
Yeah.
Because not only was he the best filming football, being a full-back, of course, because he played in that 1954 Angara Premiership.
Okay,
and he's
right.
still doing all the TV stuff here, 1954 full-back for Angara. But he also did, usually at the end of a game, he did an interview.
Yeah.
Furthermore, Nev, what was your build-up like during the week and that training, etc., and that as normal, or was there anything special done?
No, not really. We probably only trained for 3/4 of an hour on Tuesday night, just mainly all skill work. Didn't do hardly any running at all, so we had fresh legs for days. We knew Wirral might blow out a bit the last quarter because they had a couple of hard games, and I think that we proved it today. That's what happened. Thursday night we probably only trained for about half an hour. That was enough, and well, we wanted to keep going, but Dry pulled us up while we was on a high and left it at that.
Well, thanks very much for coming over and talking to us anyway, Nev, and all the best, and that. Hope you enjoy yourselves tonight and probably for the rest of the week. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, girls.
Yeah. Now,
so very quickly, when did you first film a football game?
1981.
Gathers the ball in, taps it on now. Over the top of the ball is Moose, Haydn, Davey, Clunan. Davey comes out with it. Plays the ball in front of him, taps it on to McLaughlin. McLaughlin off the left boot, magnificent goal.
1981.
And that was in Port Lincoln?
That's Port Lincoln. We done Port Lincoln, Tumby Bay.
That's straight into the lock player, into the square. He's looking out wide here now. And the lock player takes the mark, plays on quickly. Looking short again, looking for Skinner. Skinner takes the mark. Oh, and Rogers plays on.
And this gentleman here, if Webb broke his nose, Webber's not very happy at all. This is on. Well, this is on and here, and this right in front of the commentary team.
Come from everywhere.
There's
some haymakers going here.
This is not good for Great Flinders footy. And it's on here in front of us. In the she's an all in, mate.
She's going again.
The trainer got over. This is all in here. This is a shocking scenes in Great Flinders footy.
And the umpire. Tumby play. Gets him.
Number 11, that's Higgins.
Yeah.
Former Tummy Bay got to hit high, but...
And then up to Peter Nippy in 1970?
97. Was that?
97.
97. So you didn't film another one after that?
Not up there, no.
So how many football games have you filmed?
We've covered, hang on, we've covered 150 football grand finals. That's including, reserves seniors and reserves and the A grades, yes.
Yeah. How many do you still have? How many do you still have copies of? Because I know you had a clean out.
Brett O'Brien, another handball over the top to Gonzo. Gonzo cops one high, moves the ball on quickly in the direction of Trev May. There's a great mark taken there by Mid Bulldog.
Okay. He's the best.
Yeah, it would have been,
He was. You know, he's the best film. He played fullback in Angara's Premiership in 1955 or something.
Oh, yes.
So I was going to say, the way that you read the ball when you film it, it looks like you did. Who'd you play for?
Angara.
Oh, really?
Yes, that was in the, back in the 34, in the 50s.
So the Eastern Air
Yeah,
days.
we won the premiership in 1954, playing Butler in the grand final at Lipson.
Wow. And
Yeah,
that's
they
when
were going for 3 premierships in a row.
Yes, they were too, actually.
Golly, what's wrong with this here?
And you knocked them off. Where did you play?
Full back.
Yeah, really. So you're up against it. Yep.
Golly.
Yeah, he was still playing tennis out there when I left.
Yeah.
Yes, well, he went on to play with Eyre United. I remember playing against Ron.
And he could play?
Yeah, very hard, strong.
Ron Campbell, quickly, could you tell me about Ron Campbell as a footballer?
Very keen, rugged, and loved the game.
Yeah, well, see, Ron coached me when I was a colt at Eyre United.
Because he's Hungarian?
Yeah, and Brenton's his lad's my age, or a year younger than me. Yeah.
Well, he's still working. He must be about 80.
No, I don't think he's working now, is he?
Yeah.
Is he still working?
He still does the news coverage,
Okay.
Yeah.
Has he kept much of his footage?
No, unfortunately, he has chucked it out because he said he was so disillusioned, he binned it all. He binned it. Yeah, that's anyway, he said I never thought anyone was going to take an interest, so I just chucked it. About 6 years ago, he said he just figured no one was ever going to be interested again. But luckily, the clubs seems to have mostly bought the stuff off him. So. Yeah, the cameraman's had an issue.
Yeah, I don't think he realised it zoomed out.
No, he was dealing with something. Well, I know the behaviour. He had a problem that he was dealing with over here. He wasn't. And that's why he zoomed back. That's what you do.
Just tighten out. No. Ah, bastard.
Don't touch the wire. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm not touching the wire. I haven't even been touching the wire.
Leave it in there.
It's okay.
How's that? Can you hear us now? Can you hear us all right now? Okay,
Don't
right.
touch the wire.
All right. We're not allowed to touch the wire anymore here.
Central Eyre just scored a goal.
And we don't even know who did it. There's been chaos here in the commentary position, I can tell you.
Hastings. Anyway, we're back to the play. Brock Kennelly out in the wing. Good gather. Over to Tommy.
That?
Tommy back to who we got there, young Agars.
Yeah, that's Brad Agars.
No, it's goes.
That audio's not working.
Mullins, long.
Oh, that's desperate by Lamar. I didn't quite get there.
Gonzo, contest. Oh, young Kenny, well done. Well shepherded there.
That audio's not working, Heather. That mic's not working. Just come out and stand here so I can tell you when it's not working. There's too much movement in the cord.
Right, so what would that be?
Just come out and finish off the quarter down here. So, all right. Please have it quick, huh? Testing, that's all right there. 1, 2, yep, that's all right. That's right, just hold it. Yeah, just take your hand away from the bottom there. Hold it firmly up there.
Righto, back in the centre bounce here and out it goes. Brock Kenley's got a chance to handball over. Nifty O'Brien a chance, shoots on goal from half forward. I tell you what, that's got the depths too. Another goal to central air. And they're pressing on with it here. The boys think it's a bit of a joke down the front here, but they'll have to put up with it. We've been shifted, technical difficulties here in the commentary position.
In a word, how would you describe your experience at Peninsula in 1997?
Oh, yes. Oh, filming the...
Grand final.
Oh, yes. 1997, that was at Woodner.
The one at Peninsula.
Oh.
When it rained and rained and rained.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
If they get a score on the board, it'll go down to the wire.
And Gonzo! And Bucky will kick a goal!
I think that'll get him the game, Jodie.
That'll do.
That'll get him the game.
It won't matter what it was. A score will help, and I've never seen so many fellas pat someone on the back for kicking a point in my life.
That'll get him the game, Judd.
Anyway,
Bucky McKenna.
No,
That's the second time in the quarter he's kicked.
not your Beinke. And Lawrence
Bucky
North,
Beinke,
he'll be
sorry.
paid that mark. And if anyone's a chance to get it right into the team.
She's wet that day.
Well, tell me about that day.
Yeah, it was blowing his ring off from the north.
You can tell.
Yeah, and then the big thunderstorm came in, and then it was just rained all day. It was wet as.
You can laugh about it now.
Yes. I felt sorry for the football club because I guess I was expecting something more than what I could give, but everything seemed to go wrong. It was raining, we was getting wet gear, and the mic, I had it on a long lead for the commentator, and that sort of played up a bit. So unfortunately, it was one of the hardest grand finals that I'd done.
It still turned out magnificently, the footage.
Do you reckon?
Yes, because you were up against it, so, you know. So defenders make good cameramen.
There's plenty of players out there on the wing to kick it to. High up to Engelhardt. Engelhardt marks. Oh, beautiful mark. Terrific. You can see that on the replay. Strike me pink. He's down.
What a mark.
He hasn't moved either.
Even before really good professionals like Ron Campbell started filming in 1981, you had really good amateurs like Peter Freeman and Max Oswald, Laurie Scholes, who bought good quality gear and were recording terrific material as far back as the 50s.
It's a good mark taken here by McAvoy, a strong mark. He's going for a driving kick. Far too much height in it for delivery to a forward.
Who videoed this?
Peter Freeman.
There's that skinny little fella there just walking out of the goal square. He's turned a bit round and square now.
That's you.
This is a better throw in. Oh, he got that one. That was a bloody beauty, that one.
Red move.
Come on, boys. Brilliant. Len picked it up and broke away and drove her in. Grub. Oh, well done, Grub. Well done, Grub.
That's good shooting, Peter.
Yes. It's good.
Yeah. So you knew you were going to have a good year, though, in 1982 when you bought the camera, obviously.
Oh, I think that you just got it into your head that he just wanted to start, you know, creating a bit of history, have something to look back on. Yeah. Didn't you, really? Yeah.
There's a couple of things that are really good about the footage. One is that you had a tripod, so it's not wobbling around all over the place.
Yeah.
And that also means that when the play stops, you can hold it, you can just take your hand off and so it stays steady. Because normally in the stoppage, that's when it starts really wobbling around.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that 2008 is a good example of that. It's good to have, but, you know, handheld is very different. The other thing, Peter, is that obviously as you played the game, you went to where the ball was going rather than trying to follow the ball.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is the way to shoot football. Yeah.
Chop. Good. Oh, he didn't catch it. But that probably better off he didn't. Glenn killed. No worries. No worries. Yep, no worries.
Legend. Beautiful.
Just on the top of the bloody...
top of his car.
Top of the car.
Yeah.
Oh,
So Barb was telling me today he had a big board sitting on top of his car.
If I can put in a couple of
Look at that.
nice short passes,
Look at
the shag's running.
Look
Oh,
at
two
two.
bounces. Oh, get out of me right all through
And
you.
then a beautiful kick right into the goal.
Yep, but
Oh, Nettie will get a goal there.
no. Yo, Grub's gonna. Cover off, yep.
Grub got it. Look at that.
Yep, look,
Shag ball.
come from Shag.
Come back from half.
Yep, he took the mark down there. And 3 bounces and burst her through and got the ball running. Get the ball in fast.
Oh, that was good. That's... Oh. And that ball in it now. Keep that sort of ball right under it. Get that
Yeah,
blood.
but the answer was quick to what the big goal they got. It was pretty quick.
Yes. Yeah. I feel proud of a side when they can play like that.
Oh, it looks good. Glenn's back in ruck. Down goes the bounce. Oh, he got the tap out beautifully, but oh, too high. Quinny was a bit slow getting in there. Quinny could have come through instead of Dave McAvoy. Well, Paul Mac will mark this. No, he dropped it again.
Actually, I also like the way that you gave it a musical soundtrack as well with Up There Gazali.
Up There Gazali, yeah.
Give that a few guys.
Well, the Reds have got some blues there. Hell of a lot of blues there to fix up. I hope Nettie gives them a good talking to this quarter because the concentration, they're frightened of grand finals, I think. She's no different than any other match. She's only a Saturday. I think they just talk to one another, settle down, get the body behind the ball and straight through. The other fellas will start panicking, then you got them beat. If you're in trouble, all the fellas coming through, handball out. But this poor bug is thinking a fair bit today. I've been up here for an hour and he's read that program through, I would say 6 or 7 times. The only thing he's going to get out of it today, the poor bugger. Oh well, he'll be with them though, celebrating I should think. Got that part of it. He's helped us get where we are.
Now there's a lot more things to football than really meets the eye. There are days when you could give it up, there are days when you could fly. Either love or hate it, depending on the score. When the team run out or they kick a goal, how's the mighty roar?
Was that you pressing the button of the tape recorder?
It would have been.
Would have had to be.
Yeah. And it perched up on the top of our Ford station wagon with a bit of board across it. And
Really? So you were all set up?
there. Yeah, that all happens on that.
Here comes Pete. He's just been out to record what happened at quarter time. Got a good kick anyway. Good mark, Piedmont. He been from Rovers best today too, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, he done a wobbly old kick. Rick, God almighty, he didn't read that.
I don't know whether they had that good a PA set up there though.
No.
You reckon, Tim? That would have been going around the oval.
No, it didn't go around the oval, but Schooner Wilson, man, we had some there for the showground, for the shows, a couple of speakers there, and the wiring was always there.
Yeah.
So
It probably was.
Well, we're going to get in the grand final. They got to fight back from here.
Oh, Sharky, brilliant. Oh, that's not so brilliant.
Who was that second handle?
Yeah, that was unreal.
And the right year to do it. Very rare to have a film crew set up in the country, and let alone a year like that.
Because at that stage, Pim was playing B grade, wasn't he? Footy. And so Pete sometimes would have to start the commentary, and then Pim would rock up, he'd rush through his shower and race back and hop up there and start. Right, okay, let's get into this, you know. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Achieving a hell of a lot yet, you're just starting to keep scrambling.
Get a bit of a commentary with it, do you?
Yeah, Pim comes up here directly and he does it.
Oh, yeah. You'll be getting the hang of it now.
Yeah, starting to. Oh, here comes Pim, so we're pretty right now.
Good effort, Peter. You deserve an Oscar. I'll shake your left hand. But that is really magnificent. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's what, 4 2, is it? That's 16, 18.
Looks like beating Rovers meant a lot.
Oh, yeah. Any game we beat them.
Oh, yeah.
Terrific material. In fact, Max Oswald. I mean...
Jeez! Hell, that's an old bud.
You were out there that day, that's 1959.
Well, I'll be buggered who took that.
Yeah, so what do you remember about 1959? This day?
Bloody good year.
Yeah.
Bloody oath. Fair bit of piss drank.
Dennis Betch, is that true? Was a fair bit of piss drank?
That was true.
But his farm stuff is terrific. This is you over there?
Over there.
So you're in the green,
Yeah.
holding the lamb?
Yeah. Now this is back out where they were spraying the air spraying things. And this is the same farm or same area. And that's Jim Pringle bought the garage. This is before he bought the garage. He used to work for Watherston and Lowell Barnes and those fellas out the Woodner East. And
this one's 3 tractors, 3 bar combines with a crawler in the front.
That's Jimmy Pringle.
Yep, and he worked for Barnesy, so this is LP Sowens.
Of course, this is a lot easier than in your dad's day when he was dealing with tape.
Yeah.
He would have probably commented.
Oh, that's why a lot of the films, because he had carrying a light meter with him at the same time, and you end up getting around too far into the sun or things like that. And
so he really got into it then? He got into the...
Oh, he was fairly serious about it, I think. Like we took a lot of photos of out the ranges and that sort of thing, picnics and different areas. And
you know, through necessity is the mother of...
A lot of invention, yes.
Well, having had the garage and being a mechanic, obviously he was... And I gather that he was a fairly progressive farmer.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He got into the technical side of things.
Yeah.
Yep, and he wasn't frightened by technology.
No, he built a lot of his own machinery and upgraded it. And everything, even a new machine, he'd upgrade it and do something with it.
That's pretty classic, a new machine upgrade.
Yeah.
Yeah, so logically, Eyre Peninsula has been a wealth of talent for the likes of Brian Hill to call on a lot, as I did when I was at the Port Lincoln Times and I did the Bush Telegraph. Thank you very much, Wendy Treloar, for their contribution as far as covering local events, which they did, you know, in a lot of cases, unpaid.
Oh, you know, you get some funny things when you edit a little country paper. And as you say, you can't go up and cover everything. It's just you waste too much time driving up there and back. So you work out who's the most sensible person in a district and ask them to do it for you, and they'll probably do it. And we had it was the anniversary of the hall at Stokes. So I got this bloke who was quite intelligent, sensible fellow, and I said, look, just give me a little power and I'll put it in. And when he sent me the story, in his story had there was a wedding. There was no church in there, so weddings were held in the hall. And he said, for the first wedding in the district, every man, woman and child of the whole district came and attended and watched the wedding being consummated in the hall. And I was tempted to leave it. But I thought,
Wheat black with 2 sugars, please. 2 sugars.
You have sugar.
Sorry.
I was tempted to leave that in. I thought I'd better not, because poor bastard had been helping me.
Well, it was your privilege to get to see that.
And Bryony, I haven't got any tablets, so you have milk though, don't you?
Oh, no, just wheat black.
Wheat black. Your wheat black 2 sugars.
Yeah, good on you. Lovely.
Wow.
Now, sorry, now that I've got everything going, can you tell me the name and the previous occupation of your father?
He was always a printer.
It was Maurice Henry Hill. Was his name, and he was always a printer. He was apprenticed in the 19th century to Captain Davey Drysdale, who had the Port Augusta Dispatch. Captain Drysdale was captain of the local rifle club, but he always used the honorific title captain. And Drysdale, what was his name? Yeah. He launched a paper in Port Lincoln in 1904 and sent our father down, who was an apprentice of his. He did a 6-year apprenticeship. Sent him down to set it up. So they came down on a ketch with it was all handset type in those days, individual letters.
All these little...
And on the trip down, the cases got tipped over, so the type was all pied, as they call it in the trade. So what they did was tip it out on the bar of the Grand Hotel, because it was the only flat space available. And my father, who was a lifelong absolute teetotaler, always told me he spent the first week of his life in Port Lincoln in a hotel bar.
On his knees in the front bar of the hotel.
Dissing the type back into the correct, compartments in the cases.
Incredible story. Yeah.
And then he went back to Port Augusta. And when he started, I think, as an apprentice, I've got his apprenticeship papers.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
And when he started, he was on 2 and 6pence a week.
Yep.
He was a printer's devil. But of course, they quickly had to learn the trade.
Yes.
And the press they had was an eagle press, like the one in the Art Gallery in Adelaide. Where you put one sheet on and you pull this big lever with a metal eagle on it, and back and take the sheet off, and that did that side. That's what they were doing in Port Augusta when he started. And when he finished, and each year his wage went up by 2 and 6pence, 2 shillings and 6pence. So when he became a journeyman, he graduated, Captain Drysdale sacked him and put on another kid because he could, he had to pay him the adult wage, which I think then was probably 26 shillings a week or some bloody thing. And he could start a kid at 2 and 6 and get the same work out of him. So then my father worked all around the state.
In printing offices?
In printing offices, country offices. And then in 1970, he had very poor eyesight. So he was rejected for military service in World War I because of his very poor sight. His older brother went and he was killed at Gallipoli.
Sorry, yep.
And in 1917 he started the Port Augusta Transcontinental newspaper in partnership with Edwards and perhaps with Lynn Ritchies, who was a local Labor politician. And from there, he and Edwards bought an interest in the West Coast Recorder, which was the old paper he'd worked on in 1904.
At Port Lincoln.
In Port Lincoln. But they only got 18/39ths of it. Mrs. McGregor owned the balance. So they couldn't get anywhere with it. So in 1927, they started the Times in opposition to the Recorder. So for some time, until 1940, when the rationing of paper buggered them, they had 2 papers in Lincoln. It was cutthroat. But I mean, Lincoln was expanding then. The railway expanded in 1927 right up through the peninsula. The Todd water scheme was installed, water. The freezing works, government department, killing fat lambs for export came in. And Cresco opened a factory there, so it was boom time for South Australia. And of course, in the fishing, it's...
Yeah, but I remember the paper just being so special and people at the pub just looking and... Because I was from WA and the papers, all community papers were kind of free. It was like a free... And you'd go, oh, it was literally the local rag. And here people called it the local rag, but it wasn't. It was like gospel. People would sit and read it. All the sports were in it. It was massive. And people would go away to school and then they'd get the paper delivered so that they'd know what was going on in their communities. And they'd know births and deaths when people died. You wouldn't really know.
In fact, I know from when I was at News Limited, they did a big in-house study on what people actually look at in the paper in about 2000. It was Australia-wide. Births, deaths and marriages is number 1. The rest of the classifieds are number 2. Then there's the sport. And this is bad for our ego, but real estate's quite well read. Display ads are the worst read thing. Hardly anyone looks at them. And then second to bottom, with only 5% of the readership looking at them, is the news stories. But that's News Limited papers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they define...
But see, like city papers have a disconnect from their community. They really do. They go, this is what's important. Whereas, do you know what? There's like, Mabel won something for her flowers. Everybody in that community goes, well done, Mabel. They know Mabel. It's important. Whereas if you're reading a paper in the city, like city papers are dying, but country papers should not be dying, and they shouldn't because it's all local. It affects you. It's important. It's like the fridge factor. You get your photo. I mean, we've got the reception kids' pictures up here still. It's like it was in the paper. You cut it out, you stick it on the fridge. Grandma gets it, auntie gets it, everyone gets it. Like that's the value of a country newspaper. And it's still the life and soul of it. And you'll find that something will be in a country newspaper and it'll be quirky and a really interesting human story. And then those bigger papers will then go and pick it up because it's like, wow, this is interesting.
But you've just...
And they need more
You've just put your finger in it though.
To
Quirky.
actually work.
It can't just be local and relevant. It has to be quirky.
Yeah, or something absolutely catastrophic and tragic, which we've all kind of lived through, city media coming and and kind of, just flying into town and getting the big story and then leaving, and we sort of left
with the bad taste in everyone's mouth.
Yeah, and trying to do the right thing by
the worst thing I've ever seen was on the office wall of the editor of the Mercury, that's Ian McCausland, who was a famously ferocious Scot, was a picture of a dead girl on the front page. And he was really proud of that because they had more letters of protest, about 3,000, than they'd had about any other article they'd ever run or any photo. And his argument was that, yeah, she was dead when she got to the shore, but there's no medical proof that she was dead when the photo was taken out in the water.
Oh my God.
And that was up on the wall. This is a News Limited approach. Now, significantly, of course, fewer than 5% of their readers are reading at least one article, and that's defined as getting to the third sentence, by the way.
Mm.
So News Limited, which has closed down the Messenger, which was their community newspaper, strangely, and has kept their scandal rag, which they know from their own in-house studies, no one's actually reading the content. Like 5% is not much. That's 95% of people are not reading even one article to the
It's probably worse now because I would get my daily fix of news perhaps from, well, you know, I work at ABC, so ABC, you go online and your stuff is online. But
this is back in 2000 when there was no online news. There was no competition. Now it's obviously worse, but this is back in the good old days. You know, so now it's, well, now what you end up with is the ABC, where your mum is now, and you've got the local government funded new paper that's just started up the coast because they see the need for a local newspaper, you know, local notice board, you know, and so, but that's the model of the future because there's no actual revenue in it anymore, because the classifieds was the main thing and that went earlier to Craigslist.
Newspaper moguls, they were like, it was big money.
Murdoch used to call it his rivers of gold because classifieds, how much it cost to put a classified in? Like a little tiny bit of space, say 3 lines, you pay $70.
Yeah, well 60, yeah.
Yeah, $60, $70. And so...
The classified is like a little advertisement, like a death notice or something. You wouldn't even know what a classified was if you were like talking gobbledygook.
But this used to be the norm, and that's what we're talking about. And they would have pages and pages and pages, like the Advertiser would have, the Port Lincoln Times would have, what, 4, 5, 6 pages of classifieds, and that's just all solid, expensive little ads, notices. And that was their rivers of gold. And then that went to Craigslist, and now to, you know, there's obviously Gumtree and the others. So the classifieds went. And then there was the real estate, which sort of once a week you had a profitable paper. And the Times having two a week, at least the Thursday one was making money. Now that's pretty much gone to realestate.com and Domain. And now, so really the media that's going to be left is the publicly funded media. And that's going to be about it. Am I wrong?
I don't know. They've just got to figure out a way to make money for them, and
which they haven't
make sense.
yet.
Yeah, and to make it make sense because I'm print. I love print.
Well, it turns out that news is a service that used to be provided by newspapers because they had so much money coming in.
Yeah.
Sadly, we can probably call this film the best of times, Brian, because because the best of times were.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, you were lucky to have a newspaper while it was the best of times for newspapers.
Yes.
Because they, well, classifieds were going, they were rivers of gold, weren't they? What were you charging for a classified per centimetre?
Oh, wouldn't be any more than $5.
Yeah, but back in the day.
Yes, I remember I went to Heather to put in a berth about one of my great-grandsons. I wasn't going to put it in, it was my 4th, all born in New York. And Karen said, look, Mum, if you did it for the other 3, you've got to do it for this one. I went down to the Times and it was something like $30 or $50. I said to Heather, in my day that would have been $6.50. And she said, Joan, how long since you've been here? It was 30 years. Anyway, beers, the Advertiser was much dearer. It was about 80 minimum.
Well, in the letterpress days and the linotype setting, just because it was all so labour intensive, it wasn't very profitable. I mean, we made a profit every year, but it wasn't spectacular. But when we went on the computer setting and the easy way to make it up and converted to a bi-weekly, it was quite a profitable paper for years, wasn't it, Joan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly was, but I was...
we would have made 10 times the profit per year that we used to make under the old labour-intensive thing. Just too many people.
That's what I mean.
You know, you've got 2 dozen people there you're paying. Whereas today, as you know, you can run a thing like that with a couple of people, really, virtually.
Well, with the advent of desktop
Wally,
publishing, which really changed.
60.
Oh, here we are.
That was 60 there. And this is our first great-grandson that's very like the Estonian side.
Very nice. Well, let's put this up against the screen there and I'll...
But there's 3 others after him.
I'll take a picture of it in a sec, but this is, what occasion is this? This is...
My 60th.
The 60th. Whereabouts did you... Oh, this is at home. This is in your house?
Yes. Or I'm at Karen's.
Oh, yeah. Mm.
I turned 90 this year.
Happy birthday. When's that?
I turned 90.
Oh, you're already 90. Well done.
So
Congratulations.
Bronny's in his 80s.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep, I'm 84 and a half.
Oh, and you were mentioning Brenton.
The halves are important.
Did you know Brenton died?
Yes, I was very sorry to hear that. I spoke to him probably...
Rehn.
Oh,
Brenton Rehn.
He was our agricultural editor.
Yes. And he went to the stock journal.
He died.
Oh.
He had a heart attack and they couldn't work out what it was. And they put him in the, what do you call it, flying doctor plane, I think it was. And his wife waved him goodbye and he died in Adelaide. And they found that it was behind the heart. They couldn't, that's why they couldn't locate what it was to help him.
He was a very good agricultural journalist, so he was a farmer.
Yeah, he was at Ceduna, the Sentinel for a while, Brian.
When I was there, but of course he farmed at Warminda. After being Moano Bay, but I believe they bought him.
Yeah, he was a farmer.
At Warminda.
The Wrens.
And I remember he said to me when he was working for us in Lincoln, he's going all over the peninsula. He said, Brian, wherever I go on Eyre Peninsula in the far west coast, I'm never more than 30 miles from a relative. So you have all these German farmers up there, you could ring them up and say, coming up, and they'd stay with us.
It was Peter Wren what was the footballer? That was his...
Peter Wren.
Peter Wren.
That was his nephew.
Well, Sean's his nephew, Peter's his brother.
Oh, yes, Peter's his brother.
And Peter really was a good footballer. He won a Mile medal playing for Arno Bay.
And I played for 17 years and I was involved with the club right from when I began to goal umpire, some bounty umpire when I was a kid. My first year that was in 1956 and I bounty umpired, then I was 14 and did it next year, and then I spent a year in college and I went home and I began to play. And 59 I wasn't too flash. I was still a pretty light kid and still growing and I got to say probably a bit timid too. But a year later I was anything but. And I sort of transformed, I suppose, from a boy to a man in 1 year virtually. And we won the premiership in 60, lost the grand final 61, won it again in 62, had 2 years off, then did 3 in a row. And then of course that one in 74 was a good bit later, but I played in, I think it was 7 grand finals, we won 5 of them. I think it was, yeah.
He was apparently sort of similar in style, but no, he didn't have the skills. I don't think he was a great kicker or anything, but he was a ferocious big man who won a Mile medal. So he was a bit of a footballer.
Well,
right? Were you a footballer, Brian?
Didn't have time.
High school.
Were you a basketballer, Joan?
No, we didn't have time.
Didn't have time because you were working.
Oh, at school I was, but not after school.
Yeah, so you were working on the paper at what age, you guys?
Oh no, I didn't go there till I was married.
Oh really?
I worked in a bank, the Bank of Australasia.
Oh really? How long for?
Until I got married. And Karen was about 2 or 3. Mum came down and said, look, it's a family paper and the girls were on holidays and we're really busy and I think you should come and help out for a fortnight. And the fortnight turned out to be 36 years. Loved it.
Well done, fantastic. And I must say, it's a real pleasure. And it was a real pleasure to be there. And Brian, thank you very much. Fantastic. You're just a real pleasure generally. But anything else that we can add about? That was just a nice point to finish it. But I really did enjoy my time at the Port Lincoln Times. It was where I wanted to stay forever. But Brian, you were going to say?
I'm going to say we were a newspaper family, so ink was in our blood. And unfortunately, the next generation after us, we were the second generation after our father, the next generation were not interested.
One of your daughters did...
my brother had a son, he apprenticed to the government printer as a printer because that was a Rolls Royce place then. But this lad started surfing on weekends. He said, oh, bugger this. So he took off in a combi van with mates and they cruised around Australia, and they used to write to the government saying, we'll be in Penang next month, send our cheques there, you know, sit-down money they get. So he was no good. And then afterwards, he joined the Air Force and loved it, regimental. And he had a beard and he was a hippie. He joined the Air Force, uniform, upright. But then he busted his leg playing soccer in the Air Force and he's invalided out. But one of his sons is a military officer, been to Duntroon. And
but then John employed Philip, and Philip went right through, but he went to Perth.
He had another son, Philip, that moved to Perth, but he was a printer with us. But after that, there was no one. One of my daughters used to go there during the uni holidays and work as a journalist. That's Tanya. So when she finished,
her cadetship,
she worked there for a year as a journalist, but then wanted to head off. And 2 years later, she's working for Murdoch in New York. You know, so it's no good saying, I'll come back to the Lincoln Times. I always used to love telling people, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm editor of the Times. And they said, oh, jeez, that's, you know, I wouldn't tell them Port Lincoln Times.
You didn't tell them how much harder you were working than the editor of the New York Times?
Yeah. I remember when we were looking for an editor once, I forget who left, and we were looking, and it was just when the Murdoch sacked a lot of journalists off the Advertiser. So he had all these blokes, and I interviewed some of them. Christ, I wouldn't employ one of them. And one bloke, oh, I'd love to go to Lincoln as editor of your paper because I want to write a novel. I said, how are you going to write a novel when you're editor of a country paper? He said, well, it's only a little country paper. There's nothing to do all day, so I write my novel. So, but that was the attitude of a lot of them. You just wouldn't put them on. I mean, they would have died if they'd got there and realised the work they had to do just to get the bloody paper out.
Were they people with any previous experience? Was it perhaps city experience? Or?
Oh, they're on the Advertiser.
Yeah, all city experience. Very, very different.
Yeah, like you, they would have done a story a day or a week.
That's right.
They thought, gee, we'll go to Lincoln, you'd do one a month. And I'll write my novels.
Right, but you're in fact doing 6 to 8 a day is what our expectation was, I remember.
Yeah.
6 to 8 stories a day, and probably 4 or 5 of them would have a photograph with it.
Yeah. So I used to go down often after school and fiddle around work in the workshop part. Mainly the bum jobs the others didn't want to do, like putting the reglets away, you know, the dividers, the
like the columns.
M's and 6 point and so on. They go in special boxes in a case. And then I'd melt up the lead and pour the ingots for the linotype machine. And then I went away to university and specialised in girls and beer. And my father died, so I had to go back and work on the paper.
Big shot.
And then I had a bit of a dispute with the journalists' union over the fellow we had, because he was Jock Albert, was on his own. They said, he's got to be editor. You can't have a bloke just on his own. But Wally and my sister said, yeah, but if we have an editor, he can be an A grade or whatever it was. So they said, well, why don't you be editor? So and that was it.
That's it, you're editor.
That's how I got the job.
Brian didn't tell you he was Ducks at
59.
And he was very, very good at English.
So he took like a duck to water?
Oh, well, sort of.
Well, you took to the workload like a duck to water.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, because it finds you out if you can work or not.
We love going to the
conferences. We won a lot of awards too.
Yes.
So then after 11 or 12 years, and as I say, the ink's in your blood, but I was forming these prospecting syndicates and we're prospecting in the west for nickel. And then I was farming those out to major companies like Sumitomo and Nomura Trading, Consolidated Goldfields.
Yep.
And it got too busy because we'd get the paper out Thursday and I'd jump on a plane, get to Kalgoorlie, run around the bush, line things up, and and then I might have to shoot to Sydney and try and do a deal on it, and then get back Monday and get the work on the paper to get it out for Thursday. So it was getting me down. So with reluctance, I said, look, I've got to leave, because I've got to run these mining companies, because we were doing backdoor listings too. The syndicate, when I had these farm outs, we'd backdoor it into an existing listed shell. And so with reluctance in January 1970, I left the paper and we got a hotshot journalist, Philip Wynne, who was there for 10 years, I guess.
Phil?
Phil had worked for Murdoch in
Very good.
Broken Hill and Messenger Press, he was editor of, and Mount Isa. And Philip was a very keen yachtsman. So he wanted to go to Lincoln because of the yachting. So I said, righto, Phil, that's the job. And I sat down with him and I said, now, you know, what's the package? What do you want? And Philip said, look, just pay me the award rate. Because all I want to do is get to Lincoln and I can sail my yacht on the weekends. So that's fair enough. I looked up the award rate and it was 50% more than my family had been paying me all those years. Not that I minded. I thought, shit, I never knew that. That's what the rate should have been.
There you go. That's
no, but we all paid like there were cousin, brother-in-law, brother, sister, me in there, so everyone paid the same.
But I was going to say before that when it did jump up, it jumped up like it doubled. I remember the cadet's wage went from, I was making $260 a week, it went to $450 a week.
God,
overnight.
God.
Just to, you know, obviously you didn't have the paper then, but that would have made it really interesting on the on the bottom line. Because newspapers, like you say, are so people heavy, and they still are.
Yes.
And in fact, if you look at those big newspapers, like I'm talking about, you have lots of people sitting around doing not very much work. To be honest, when they lost their revenue stream, it made it really difficult when you're paying a lot of people to not work very hard. I mean, I'm talking about probably, 20 subs sitting there doing, a couple of stories a night. All the keyboards at the Mercury were disgusting. They were all overgrown with mould and yucky stuff in there because people would just sit there chatting all night with their coffees and spill so much coffee on it. The hygiene also gets worse the bigger the paper you're at, but sorry.
It'd drive you crazy, wouldn't it?
By the Mercury when they bought us.
What?
Wasn't that Rural Press?
No, that was News Limited Mercury.
Pardon?
They bought the Examiner probably when they
bought the Examiner.
Bought the Examiner, I think, because that's Rural Press bought the Examiner, but that's News Limited's Mercury.
Yeah. No, I'm glad we're out of that.
Well, you sold at the right time, didn't you?
Yeah, by luck.
Because they came in with an offer, I guess. When you sold the paper?
1993.
Did you go looking for a buyer because no one was interested?
1990.
We went looking. I mean, they're all getting older. I thought I was the youngest. I was just going over for these meetings as chairman of the board of the Port Lincoln Times. And I thought, Christ, and then my cousin Ian, who's 92 now, he was working there and they had this thing over the press when it's whizzing, and if a bit of paper got caught on a roller, you got to stop the machine and you take the bit of strip of paper off the ink roller. But Ian, for years, when he saw that, wouldn't stop the machine. He would just go ping and
cut his
grab
finger
the bit of paper off. Because as he got older, he went ping one day and his hand went into the bloody thing.
I do remember Ian cutting his finger off. Oh, it was dreadful.
Bloody thing, and mangled his bloody hand, and I thought, Christ.
He'd be flown to Adelaide. And
these people are going to kill themselves. So I said, they're all in their 70s then, weren't they?
Yeah.
60s, 70s. And I thought, look, this is crazy. There's no one else coming on in the next generation that's going to take over from us. So we better sell it, which we did.
Heather Ettridge is about the only person there, isn't she?
Still there, that's right. But the building's on the market, and of course they've started, the councils have funded, because there's, newspapers been losing money for 20 years at least. And the councils have funded that new one called The Advocate, which they base at Cleve, because they, obviously, And that's only a vanity exercise because the
Yes.
councils want their credit.
Right.
You know, where it's due, because like I say in here, that it's actually the local football netball Facebook pages have taken over as the local notice board, which is the most important function of a paper. Shall we leave it there? You got any other good stories? Because you're full of them. Every time I think we're just about wrapped up, you come up with another good story, Brian. So.
Most of them are embarrassing.
Yeah.
And then one day in the hand setting bigger fonts that we couldn't do on the linotype, you had to hand set, you had a thing at a time. And Harvey's Emporium in Lincoln had this advertisement for Jackson shirt.
It was a full page sale.
And I think the printer's Devil Jock Grant took the R out of
No,
it.
it fell. It was a 1 inch thing. Jackson shirts and the R.
Jackson shits.
Well.
And Harvey went.
And it did hit the fan.
But my father saw, this is the best ad you've ever had. Look, everyone talked about it.
True too.
They found it after about 100 papers, but one of the agents picked those up, collated them, sold them, and wouldn't you know, that business
got one.
Bought
Bought one.
Came round very upset.
It would
Best ad he ever had.
It would have done. Was he convinced?
They were sold out.
It's a good argument. It's a strong argument. It's probably true.
15 shillings a shirt
15 shillings.
in those days.
Yeah, Jackson shits.
It's on the market now. The Port Lincoln Times office is on the market.
The premises.
The premises. The masthead, well, they're down to what, one newspaper a week?
Yes, Thursdays.
Not, no. We were a bi-weekly.
Always?
Not always.
Oh, okay. Certainly my time,
Yeah.
And a strong bi-weekly as well.
Yeah.
In fact, remarkably, the Port Lincoln Times is one of the last newspapers anywhere, really. How many pages was it when the Hill family took over? I mean, how big was the paper? How many pages was the Port Lincoln Times?
Back then,
12 would it be? That
no, in my day it was a very small one, was 24 pages. That was rare. A lot of it was 28, and on a good day when we had plenty of ads was 36. A rare one was 40 pages.
And what was the capacity of the presses? Because of course it got past a certain point and that's when you had to collate.
Well, we had to collate in any case.
Yeah.
And that's where, of course, your sister comes into the story as being the most incredible collator of all time, Joan. You were fast.
Yeah.
In fact, you were the fastest anyone ever saw.
But
tell us about collating. Why was it necessary and what did it involve?
Oh, the press could only do 8 pages. So when you had a 24-page paper, you had 3 lots of 8 you had to put inside to make sure the pages are running in order.
And who did that?
Oh, we had some women come in on publishing day that sat there and collated. The main work was in folding because we used to sell several thousand papers per issue up the peninsula. So they all had to be folded and put in wrappers. So they'd put the wrappers out, you'd have a stack of wrappers which Joan would have addressed on an addressograph machine during the week, and then you push that out and you put glue and then you get the papers, they quickly fold it, put it on and wrap it up.
And they're all done in
All those
postcodes.
women and Joan got very quick at doing that because you've got thousands to do.
So there was, in total collated, what was the circulation at that time?
Oh, about we can't remember.
I can't remember, over 6,000.
I think it was around 6.5, I think.
Yeah.
In my time anyway.
Yeah.
So that was probably fairly steady, I guess. What was the figure?
I think it was about 6.5 at the peak.
And so there was that many newspapers that were...
Well, not all went as subscriptions.
But they all had to be collated though.
Yeah, they all had to be collated.
Everyone had to be collated.
Every one of those 6,500 papers.
Yeah.
And sometimes they had an insert as well as a collation.
I remember that, and I remember hating it because, of course, Joan, it was everyone on board, wasn't it?
Yes.
And you collated, obviously.
Yeah.
How many years did you collate before you were?
But when I was editor, I could slide out.
I was going to ask.
You know what it's like. You go in the other room, put the feet up and think. Well, when you're editor of, as you'd know, Derek, of a little paper like that, you know, there's not much time to sit around thinking. When I was editor, we had a reporter for a while, Jock Halbert.
Oh, yes.
6 years while I was editor, then he died. And then I took on Neville Wanklin. He was a lad, he worked on the wharf, but he was mad keen to be a journalist. But the poor bugger, he'd grown up on, well, this will test you, Derek. What's the island south of Eyre Peninsula? Joe Puglisi's boat was wrecked on.
Oh.
Neptune.
Neptune, yes,
He grew up on Neptune Island. His father was lighthouse keeper.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
So poor old Neville didn't have a lot of proper education.
Yep.
So I had to rewrite everything he wrote. But he was the keenest journalist you'd ever see. Mad keen, he'd ferret out things and he'd do the most crazy job I'd give him, but unfortunately the end product, you had to really work on it for him. He couldn't spell and his grammar was a bit wobbly.
How many years was he at the Times? Because of course he went on to tugboats.
Yeah, in the end.
He was a man who pursued dreams because another dream was to go onto a tugboat.
When he left us, he worked on the tugboats.
Hmm?
When he left us, he worked on the tugboats.
Did he?
And in fact, he took almost exclusively photographs of tugboats. He was really fond of them. Russell, you know, Jodie's chap, Russell Reid, he's got several of the tug.
And this is
'cause
Neville.
He works on the tugs now, or has done for a while. And this is Volly.
It's Neville and Wally.
That's Neville.
He did photography. Must have been Tunarama, I'd say.
You yourself were a reporter for a while?
I was it.
You were it at the
I was editor, reporter, the lot.
At the Pollnitz Times? 2 papers a week?
Oh no, we were weekly then.
Oh, I was going to say.
We went bi-weekly after I left the paper.
Because that would have been impossible, surely. I mean, country newspapers do stretch the bounds of what's possible, but that would have been surely 2 papers a week.
Well, it was hard work, but as I said, I had lads, people like Neville helping part-time. Because the shipping, you know, the wharfies there, if a ship doesn't come, they get appearance money.
Yes.
They just have to go down and sign on, they get paid for the day. So he had the day available. When a ship was in, he'd have to go and work.
You a good fella?
Neville was in and out of the Times all the time. You know, he left and then I think he came back, but he was a good bloke, yeah.
Yeah, well, he loved the boats, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, the tugs and stuff, but yeah.
Yep.
So, but he was that bloody keen.
But then he came and worked full-time and he was very popular.
Yeah, he's a good lad.
He's still well spoken of now, yeah.
Wasn't educated properly, that's the trouble.
Well, he told me he was upstairs in logging the ships when Mum was giving lessons downstairs.
Which was, you know, that's good work and good skills. And I certainly appreciate...
But he wrote very good fishing stories and anything about the sea. Neville was the
Keen as buggery. Well, the Times was actually a good training ground for a lot of people, I thought, just because, you know, you had to do everything.
Exactly.
Throw it in. So we had one girl, Jenny Cooper, that came as a journalist. She was working on a paper up the River Murray. And she was an excellent journalist. You know, very keen, worked hard, but you had to rewrite a lot of her stuff at that stage. And 3 years later, she was Chief of Staff on the Sydney Morning Herald. I thought, Christ, we trained her well.
You did train her well, good job. But the good thing about the Sentinel, and like you say about the Pollnitz Times, but the Sentinel even more so, was the training that it gave you. Because there's nothing like having to see it in your head where you're looking at obviously nothing but text and your thing, and you actually visualise what you're doing and you really get a sense of what you're actually doing.
Well, I was thinking more the experience that you have to do everything. You have
Take
to
the
know
photographs.
how to cover a council meeting, police, deal with them, court case,
True.
sport, the bloody women's stuff and all this. It's there mixed, you just got to get it out, do it. You couldn't select and say, oh no, I'm the sporting bloody man that already do that.
Yeah, well, they had a revenue base anyway. Now they just don't have a... News doesn't actually pay, it's a service.
No, and well, I remember when we went online and it was like, we're going online for free. And there was a big debate, do we make people pay? And it's like, but everyone else is doing it for free, you have to do it for free. And now they're going back to, you know, there's firewalls and you have to pay for actual news. And some people will do that, but the majority of people won't. They'll just, I can get that free somewhere else.
The papers they will pay for, as it turns out, are the financial press. The Wall Street Journal makes money
with
its paywall, so does the Financial Review, so does the Financial Times.
And that would be people subscribing to that and just getting that news all the time, because that's but that's like a niche interest group.
That's right.
I was talking to someone, actually a university lady, and she said that niche magazines, there's a whole pile of younger people making niche magazines out of really good quality paper and doing articles.
Like
and doing
Frankie.
Print, yeah, and that one's been around for a long time. And she said there's more and more. And it's the next generation saying we want something tangible to hold on to, we want something that's quality and that has, it's a lot of human interest type stuff in there, not, you know, world politics or that sort of stuff. People are...
It's made the media actually, well, get into niche markets, which is what you're saying, but also lift their quality. Like it's just like record companies and stuff, like, you know, now they're getting back into vinyl, you know, big beautiful covers and this sort of stuff. It's like, yeah, it's $40, but you know, you're going to pay $30 for the download, and here for an extra $10 you get this. And I guess the magazines, when you're right, there's several new titles have started.
Yeah. So she said that she still thought that there was definitely a market for print.
But quality is what they've had to get.
Yeah,
better.
they've have to make it niche, like make it a different.
Well, you guys, what do you look at?
What do you read?
What do you read?
Where do you get your news from, Mr. Zane?
It probably gets it from you.
Well, we do talk about news as well, don't we? We do talk about current affairs and what's happening.
Sometimes, but most of the time when I'm searching up something like something in sport, it comes up with like won the grand final.
When you're Googling stuff as well. Yeah.
Doesn't mind the pressure. Oh, Marble Range are really coming up with the goods here under pressure.
Calderwood goes to the contest. It's 2-on-1, but Xavier Watson does well to spoil. Wayback's back with it. If they can get the next one, you think it's almost over. And it bounces, dribbles, and over the boundary line. Boundary umpire will... I think he's going to throw it in, or is it going to be a free for last contact?
He's going to throw it in.
He's going to throw it in.
There's not going to be much time on, mate. Hardly been many goals scored, so once you get into time on, there's only probably a couple of minutes to go.
Boundary umpire throws it in. Tap down one by no one. Hine just at the second attempt, and they come away with it way back.
Waybacks, get it on the boot. Oh, Marble Range desperately hanging on in defence.
Come away with Price Marshall. Marshall jinxed the man on the mark. He did well. Price Marshall keeps it going. Goes to the centre. And that's almost the mark taken there by Waybacks. Everybody misses it.
Good tap on.
Todd Owen with it. And now who can get to the first contest?
Strong
did
Jericho.
Well there, Jericho. And now Seth Myers. Myers onto the right boot. He gets it. They can't control it there. Waybacks. Everyone's over the top. Price Marshall with it.
His
a
legs taken
call
out.
for a trip. And there's going to be a free going to Price. In fact, it's not Marshall. It's going to be paid in favour of Jordan Clements. Clements now with it in the centre square. You can hear the crowd. They're just saying go forward. There's plenty of room out here.
Oh,
and the mark is dropped. How did he drop it? But he continues playing on. They fall over. It's Blacker into the forward 50. Can he?
Oh, he gives it to the man in front. Simon Keeley, the full forward. So he's probably his second kick today.
Service scoreboard. Waybacks 5:10:40. Marble Range 4:13:37. Tynan Keeley lining up from almost bang in front.
Well, who would you want to be kicking the goal for if your life depended on this? Would have been a man you have leading goalkeeper with the association.
This to put Marble Range in front.
Tynan Keeley taking his time. He knows how big this is. We're just about to enter time on. Keeley, he's right in front. 5-degree angle maybe. Kicking from 35.
What are you going to do with it, Spog?
Wind coming across. Tynan Keeley.
Kick the goal, of course.
He nails it. And Marble Range, for the first time today, it is 5:13 15:43. Curtis's sales and service scoreboard. Leading waybacks 5:10:40. 21 minutes gone in the final turn.
Marble Range hit the front.
You also watch Behind the News at school, don't you?
That's still going.
It is. It's incredible. BTN.
BTN.
You don't watch BTN anymore, do you, Oscar, or not? No.
We do.
Well, I remember BTN back in the late 70s.
Mm.
Yep, at Rose Park Primary we would troop over to the television room because not every room had a smart board that you can watch internet and stuff on. We would go over to the television room and watch BTN. I pretty much remember it starting, I reckon, in about probably 1978. I reckon, when I was in about grade 3, I reckon.
That's been going on for a while then.
It's a pretty cool service.
It's a really good service, and they've always done a pretty good job, I think. And whereas I can't see that the big papers have really got a big future, because I don't think they are making that much effort, to be honest.
No.
Have you seen that EP Yarns Facebook group?
Yeah, yeah.
That's one of the things that's happened that's new.
Yeah.
And that's simply people sharing their content that they already have.
Yeah, that's a good site.
It's ripper, isn't it?
Yeah,
and so many people putting all that stuff up.
Yeah, I enjoy reading it.
Yeah. Old photographs, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the history group have a bit to do with that as well.
They're certainly part of it because it's such a great history exercise, you know. And I certainly use it because you've got a search function on there, and you can, you put a search in there and you get photographs of stuff that you wouldn't even know where to start to look.
Yeah.
But someone's actually posted it, and I think there's about 30 or 40 posts a day. So
oh wow. That's
yeah, and people put up,
So who's doing it?
Humps, Neil. He was one of the very first people I wrote an article about for the Sentinel when I went up there. Brent and Rehn, and it was still getting laid out by Barney and Port Lincoln at that stage.
Yeah.
For the first couple of weeks I was up there. So this was laid out by Barney and Brenton. He said they've just changed the keg size. They brought in a new keg. And he said, that's a great story. And I went, oh, doesn't sound like a great story. But anyway, he was like, yep, get down to the pub there and do a story on the, and it turned out it was a great story because it was really significant. And Humps, who was the guy I went and interviewed because he was working at the Ceduna pub.
Yeah.
So where did the idea come from for EP Yarns, Neil?
I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Farm Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lady in Adelaide, who started the page,
mm-hmm.
and it was strictly family history then, and Lauren, her name's Lauren Waters, and there was a fella by the name of Goog Jones, a very famous Port Lincoln family, the Joneses.
Yep.
Goog and Snow were brothers.
Yep.
And it was all about Goog Jones's shack and his acceptance by the Wangari people, Lake Wangari people.
Yeah.
He was one of the early shacks at Farm Beach.
Ah, yeah.
And they pulled it down now, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny that I said to her, she added yarns into the... Because we're anecdotal,
mm-hmm.
we're an anecdotal page as well, because I tend to not believe, except for you, not to believe newspapers and what's written in them particularly greatly.
Well, you're right.
And family, if you add the family stories to the newspaper story, you probably get something in the middle that's is closer to the truth, I would say.
Mm.
And we had a great thing on a Elliston character, a fellow by the name of Willie the Rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in the early days of our page being what it is now, and it took off. Everybody had a story about Willie the Rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
And he lived just south of Elliston, and I can tell you one funny one that came up was he used to do a few jobs for the matron of the Elliston Hospital,
mm-hmm.
and she wanted him to remove, they got Norfolk Island pines at the front of the, still I think,
mm-hmm.
Elliston Hospital, and she wanted him to pull down the bird's nest out of it. And he looked at her and he shook his head and he laughed. He said, my name's Willie the Rabbit, not Willie Wagtail. And it just took off from there. And another one was Johnny Myers. at Mount Hope, and their story was Willie was trapping rabbits on the farm they were on, and they took Willie to Cummins for Christmas to do his late shopping.
Yep.
And they got home and Mum had the turkey, Mrs. Myers had the turkey and everything else, and they were unloading the car. And she said to the family, "Oh, I better go into the kitchen and get a knife and we'll dress the turkey." Well, by the time she got back, Willie got his old rabbit knife and he dressed the turkey. And apparently Dad had to take Willie in tow and put him in the car and take him home before the volcano erupted. But, you know.
And another one that really took off was that Deep's, not sure if it's a water hole or a sinkhole.
And there must be a lot of local stories about it.
Well, there was a lot of people who had the old myths, whether they're myths or not.
Well,
people disappearing.
George Dorwood from North Shield, you know, the famous white beard George Dorwood.
Yeah.
He was a shepherd on Copio. I've just found out that recently, Copio Station.
Really?
And George Dorwood's brother drowned, I think, in that. You know, that might be a reason why people don't talk about it too. So, but yes, that is a very interesting Eyre Peninsula story.
But certainly it's interesting how the media landscape has changed so much that you can get someone such as yourself, who's an individual there with access to the internet and a computer, who and an interest.
That's my what would you say? That's the genre I use, and that's all I'm good at.
And if people share your interest, then it can grow into something like how many members are there of the group?
About 15,000.
About 50,000.
I don't know how many are practicing members, but yeah.
But I mean, the mainstream or traditional media is really, really expensive to do, and even the Port Lincoln Times, which is a big and powerful, well, certainly it was, newspaper, peaked at 6,500.
Yeah.
So 15,000 is more than double that.
Well, we've included, of course, our area goes from Eucla in the west to Port Augusta in the east, and everywhere underneath.
And for the reason that you can do that is because you don't have to worry about distribution.
Well, what I found, like a little place, and you get a lot of Lake Wangari and Lower Eyre Peninsula in it. That's because that's where I come from and that's what I know. And I had a funny one, I'm also administration on the Central Eyre Peninsula. And a fella says to me, on the page said to me, he said, "You don't know anything about Central Eyre Peninsula, do you?" And I said, "No, but I'm learning." The only reason I took on that administration was the page looked like folding, and she just couldn't get anyone from around Woodner or... I've got a big trouble. I know Central Eyre Peninsula ends at, say, Poochera on this side, but I don't know where it ends on the other side. That's
probably about Kimber, probably.
Yeah, anything I dodge now is like Cow, Arno Bay. You can't really call them Central Eyre Peninsula because they're... But
also it's a matter of an individual's interest or an interest like that, having someone who's really interested in it and can sustain the
Well, it's like the latest story today on the Central Eyre Peninsula page. I had a photo of all the little mosquito fleeter farm trucks delivering grain. Now, that was in 1958. Kimber had bulk handling. And then I added a photo from Lorraine Lewis, another great supporter of the page. Lorraine Lewis, on her mum and dad, they had the Minnipah, and it was all bags in 1958. And they did something like, at Minnipah, 100,000 plus bags. Well, would have made Dougie a bit of money, but... All the other ones have adopted it, like Lock Heritage Museum. They are fantastic. The Cow, I think, has got 2 museums. They're fantastic. And we got 2 here, but I never get much out of the motor museum, don't.
Oh, right. Yep.
don't really. I think they think the page is not about them, but it is too.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's not really specific, really, is it, apart from geographically?
And it's what people make of it.
Right.
And that's what comes out. I can in no way censor or whatever. Oh, well, you do a little bit, but not. It's what comes in.
Yeah,
and I'm a bit of a drug
You're
addict.
not commissioning pieces? But
No, I'm a bit of a drug addict with photos.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm always after the next lot of photos that come in, you know.
Big time. And in fact, I find it's a terrific resource for when it's got that little search function on it, and you can search on the page for all the stuff that people have shared.
Yeah.
And what's in people's private collections is extraordinary, and it's much bigger.
The families hold the key.
Than what any museum's got. Yeah, they do.
And you know, I remember Streaky Bay about 2 weeks ago, we were sitting there going through photos, unknown photos.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, if we can't identify them, they'll probably end up getting thrown out.
Definitely.
I think I got a different. Well, it's a lot like my blog, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Because it comes up with, you know, I can be doing a story and then it gets an offshoot on it, and.
Well, it does actually, and then you end up with a whole string of comments and.
Yeah, and it goes off on a tangent, you know. And I think the difference between us, say, and the Portlingon History Group is we're a public page.
Yes.
Whereas they're, you know, you've got to get everything okayed before it gets on the page.
Well, you have an administrator too now.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, we're similar now because we're getting too much rubbish in with it.
Getting a bit of political stuff in there, that's right.
Yeah. But no, they are great support, particularly some of them I'll commend is Ashley Cowley.
Yeah, he's great, isn't he?
He has been a magic support to our page. And Chris Mantle.
Chris is a great man. Have you ever upset anyone?
Eh?
Ever upset anyone with EP yarns?
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
You go to Portlingon?
Yeah.
You probably won't get much good said about me. I work off.
I'm talking about with EP yarns.
Yeah, I work off old Perce Bailey. You would have heard of Perce Bailey.
No, I haven't, sorry.
He was one of the original historians.
Oh, right.
And you see, the mob in Portlingon History Group, they're definite. They're museum based, I call them.
Yes.
Whereas I'm just a page. I volunteer at the museum.
Oh, yeah.
Like the Streaky Bay National Trust.
Yeah.
Museum. I would, as a final comment, I would love to, I would love people to go home, look in their drawers, their cupboards. Don't throw out those photos. Put them on the page. If you don't know who's in them, ask help wanted and put them on it.
Because people will jump in and help gladly.
Yes, and there's about probably half a dozen pages on Eyre Peninsula, so that, you know, someone might remember them, even if you don't.
And what year did you start the page?
Oh, I don't know what year.
Wasn't that long ago?
No, I've been...
About 5 years
since I come down here virtually.
4 or 5 years?
Yep, 4 years.
4 years?
Yeah.
15,000 already.
Oh, we used to...
Now, just wait there and I'll get a drone. Sorry, yeah, go on. Just
we used to joke about it and we'd put up a sign with every 1,000.
Yeah.
And then there was just too many.
It's going up too fast, I think.
Yep.
Righto, thanks very much.
No.
Good job, Neil.
Yep. Do you want to hand packing this up or?
See, there we go.
Oh, yeah.
And then if we want, we can bring him around to the right and have a look at the jetty.
That's your job.
Okay, yeah.
My genre's stills.
Yeah. Now, I've just got to...
I'd love to have one though, Derek. Even these other things they're advertising now, you know, little clip-on things for your phone.
Oh, they're amazing.
They're worth it.
Oh, they're all amazing, yeah.
$300, so.
Yeah. No, the technology that's available for this sort of thing, absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Oscar, you're a dude. Zane, you're also a dude. You're not a dude.
Thanks, Derek.
Oh, I can smell seafood. So is there any Celtic people out there or whiskey drinkers?